These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Bowl and Branch Sheets, crafted for the common good. More info at bowlandbranch.com, code THOM. CB Distillery for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code THOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Thom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more information, teethhealth.com, code THOM.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. "He does not want this cash," the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Happy Tuesday. 2 weeks from today is the day that we begin officially counting the votes. Some states are counting mail-in ballots right now, and early voting for that matter, but they're not providing us with any results. You know, it could take a month for us to find out what happened in this election, but 2 weeks from today. It's amazing. Heads up, there's an amazing new movie on Netflix. Louise and I watched it Sunday night. Sean watched it Saturday. We were talking yesterday, and we were all like, wow, what an amazing movie. Aaron Sorkin, Sacha Baron Cohen, etc. It's The Trial of the Chicago 7 over on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix subscription, really worth the effort. And also, this is just kind of, random news that I want to share with you, and then we'll get into some of the real meaty stuff here. But also, yesterday, Louise got a call. Actually, she got 3 calls from 3 different numbers, and all had this pre-recorded message saying, your Apple iCloud account has been compromised. Press 1 to correct the, whatever. And Sean got one from somebody saying, your Social Security number has suspicious activity on it. Please, press 1 to talk to an operator. If you get one of these calls, these are called phishing calls, phishing with PH. And basically what will happen is you push 1 and they'll say, oh yeah, we've got your account right here, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. Please spell your name for me so I've got this correct, and give me your password for your account so that we can reset it, and then boom, you've lost everything. They do this with banks. They do it with Social Security. They do it with iCloud. They do it with whatever that drive is, the cloud-based drive that Microsoft is offering. Be very careful. There's some really nasty stuff going on right now. It's sort of like, I'm averaging now between 6 and 10 fundraising emails. I got 4 of them this morning from the Trump campaign and people affiliated with it. These guys are squeezing the last pennies out of their supporters. And when you consider, the average age of a Fox News viewer is 70 or 71, there have to be some people who are, in their 80s or maybe even their 90s who are struggling with cognitive issues. And every time they get one of these emails, they just click the button and donate another $100. I think Trump and his buddies are just loading up. They're getting as much cash as they can. I mean, there's all these people who are just totally baffled by what Trump is doing. For example, the headline over on Raw Story yesterday, a story by Brad Reed, was titled, "Trump is committing political suicide in waning days of campaign." They were quoting Ari Berman, who was a guest on MSNBC or CNN, I guess it was CNN. And, he was pointing out that Trump had said, if I listened to the scientists, the country would be in a depression right now. I'm not going to, Biden, he'll listen to the scientists. And Ari Berman is like, this is political suicide. Why is he doing this? I'll tell you why he's doing this. He's lining up his customers for next year. Whether he's going to be selling products, whether he's going to be selling, come stay in my hotels, whether he's going to be selling watch me on my new TV network if he starts or buys, one of these third-rate right-wing TV networks. There's a half a dozen of them out there now. Or whether he gets another gig with Mark Burnett and NBC to do another reality show, which I think is, frankly, probably the most likely in that hierarchy of possibilities. He's lining up his customers. Why is Trump doing these rallies all over the country? There's super spreader events. This is crazy. This is not how you run for the White House. He's making horrible mistakes. No, the guy is a salesman. He's been a salesman his whole entire life. He's a salesman who lies with ease and facility. I mean, just put this in context, right? I mean, that's why he ran for the presidency in the first place. Because he was making less than Gwen Stefani. When he discovered that Gwen Stefani was making $1 million an episode or season or whatever it was, more than he was from NBC, and he had better ratings, that's when he decided to run for president. Michael Cohen lays the whole story out in his book. He decided to run for president in order to basically convince NBC that he was a bigger star and was deserving of more money. He never wanted to win. He never expected to win. He didn't expect to get the Republican nomination. Which is kind of a sad commentary on the Republican electorate. And now we've got this situation where the Supreme Court yesterday, in a 4-4 decision, a deadlock decision, let stand a decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which said that as long as a ballot is postmarked by Election Day, it can be counted for up to 3 days afterwards. Which kind of makes sense, right? Particularly when Louis DeJoy and Trump's other, goons on the Board of Postal Governors have been doing everything they can to wreck the post office in order to slow down the mail. The other half of that strategy was literally Republican lawyers went to court and sued the state of Pennsylvania and said, you can't count any ballots after Tuesday, 2 weeks from today. You can't count any more ballots that come in the mail, even if they're postmarked before Election Day. And the state Supreme Court said, no, we're going to let people, the mail is running slow. As long as you've mailed your ballot before Election Day, you obviously voted before Election Day, we will count your ballot afterwards, even if it comes in up to 3 days after the election. But what's interesting about this is that John Roberts joined the 3 liberals, which meant that it was a 4-4 tie. The 4 conservatives, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito and Gorsuch and Biff, Beer Bong Biff, The four of them, Kavanaugh, of course, the four of them said, no, Pennsylvania shouldn't be counting ballots, even if they're postmarked before Election Day. They shouldn't do that. And had Amy Coney Barrett been on the court, that's probably the way it would have gone. But right now, people in Pennsylvania are going to be able to get their votes counted, which is, it's a good thing. But what we're looking at here is the end game of 40 years of Republican voter suppression. I mean, this really went on steroids in 2000 when Jeb Bush and his brother George, governors of Florida and Texas respectively, when George W. Bush gave Jeb the felon list for Texas, and Jeb purged Florida voters based on the Texas felon list. Lots of Hispanic names, lots of African-American names. 90,000 African-Americans in Florida purged from the voting rolls. And, in case after case after case, I've shared these numbers with you before. Hillary Clinton won, according to the exit polls, in Florida in 2016. Although the official polls showed that Trump won. She won in North Carolina. She won in Pennsylvania. She won in Wisconsin, according to the exit polls. So why were the official results off? Because hundreds of thousands of people in those four states have been purged from the voting rolls. So they went in and they voted, but they were given provisional ballots, which are only counted if there's a lawsuit. And so their votes never got counted. This is the Republicans have been doing this for forever. It's called red shift, and it only happens in states with Republican secretaries of state, by and large. I mean, the real contest right now is not between Republicans and Democrats or between Trump and Biden. It's between those people who believe in a democracy everyone's vote should count and be counted, and those people who don't. Those people who think that, only basically, affluent white people in the suburbs who only have to wait 5 minutes to vote, only their votes should be counted. So when this election is over, we've got some serious work to do. And our first project needs to be to establish a firm, irrevocable right for every American citizen to vote. So that when Republican-controlled governments try to take away your vote, they have to go to court and prove their case.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I guess the question, will American elections ever be legitimate? And what do you think about my theory about Trump, that he's just lining up customers right now? He's using our taxpayer dollars to do it. Welcome back. Chaz in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Chaz, what's on your mind today?
Na zdrovia, comrade, is another glorious day in Trumpistan, is it not?
It is a beautiful day here in the Pacific Northwest, Chaz. I hope it is up there. So what's up?
It's nice here, too, and in 2 weeks it's going to be amazing. I might change my greeting, hopefully, in about 2 weeks. Top of the show, you mentioned getting scammed.
Yeah.
All right. So you got an open...
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You have an open tab handy. I don't want to endorse a site just yet that I'm not using, but I've done a lot of research on something called Do Not Pay. Maybe during the break you want to take a look at it. It refers to itself as a robot lawyer, and I've got a separate credit card set aside just for this purpose. What happens is you give them your credit card number, and then it turns around and ends up suing them, and it costs like $36 a year, but I'm close to pulling the trigger on it. Maybe folks you want to look at it and see whether it's worthwhile.
I will make a note. Do not pay. You got it. I'll check it out, Chaz.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the call. Annie in Sugar Grove, North Carolina. Hey, Annie, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Oh, yes. Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
I understand what you did as far as getting emails from the Trump organization, but they must be vacuuming up addresses because I've never given a dime. And almost pretty much the entire year, excuse me, I've been getting Trump emails from Trump, from Eric Trump and Laura Trump. So, and my email address starts with an A, not because my name is Annie. I use a different thing, a different description. But so I think they're vacuuming up or purchasing email addresses and just sending as many, we need money because they're mostly about how much money they want us to donate.
Right.
But,
and I don't think this money is going into the campaign. I mean, they just cut back on their spending. They're hoovering up massive amounts of cash, and it's going into Trump's pocket,
right.
in my opinion.
Well, he's been a con man and a grifter his whole life. You know, I mean, when I saw him, now I'm about your age, I'm 65. When I watched Inside Edition in the 80s, which was hosted, by the way, by Bill O'Reilly, and it was all about Studio 54 and cocaine. And I saw his mug on TV, and I was like, oh, my gosh, my gut told me in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, this guy is a bad a bad seed. So, it's discouraging. But I voted early yesterday in North Carolina. It went really smooth, but there are some crazy people in these. I live in Watauga County, kind of close to Appalachian State University, and there's some crazy Trump supporters here. But it's the same ones. It's not like there's this big group. It's the same trucks driving through the grocery store parking lots with their flags, and it's the same ones shooting off their guns.
Just like the ISIS guys.
Oh yeah, they are.
Those ISIS guys. That's what they do. Is they drive around in their Jeeps with which is the Middle Eastern version of a pickup truck with giant ISIS flags, and you got the Trump guys here in the United States. Same thing.
Yep. Well, the ISIS guys, they had pickup trucks too. Toyota. Remember, they were all white Toyota trucks. So they
You're right. Yeah, they're probably stolen from the United Nations. Yeah, good talking to you, Annie. Thank you very much. Boy, what an amazing day, huh? We'll be right back. It is coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. In our latest video for folks who support our show over at thomhartmann.com, it's pretty mind-boggling, actually. The candidate Trump back in 2016 said, I'm not going to cut Social Security like every other Republican, and I'm not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid. Every other Republican is going to cut, but I won't. That's what he said. Well, what did his budget actually propose? His budget actually proposed, this is last year's budget. Congress didn't pass it, thank God, but this is what his budget proposed. $1.9 trillion in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, and $26 billion in cuts to Social Security. And now he is block granting Medicaid to the states, which is already cutting back on Medicaid programs in the red states. You can check it all out over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a few other things that I think are, worthy of note today, and then, we can talk about your thoughts on, what's going on with the Trump scam. Do you agree with me that Donald Trump he's hoping that he's going to win? I continue to think that he's got an exit strategy. I'm guessing that his exit strategy takes one of a couple of forms. Number one, he quits the presidency a few weeks before January 20th. This is all assuming he loses the election. He quits the presidency a few weeks before January 20th, so he doesn't have to show up at the inauguration of Joe Biden. And he has Mike Pence pardon him, so he doesn't have to worry about federal crimes. He could even be pardoned for tax fraud, right? That's a federal crime. But then he's got the problem with state crimes. And how does he get out of that? I'm not sure. Maybe down in Florida, Ron DeSantis can protect him. I don't know. So, which brings up the possibility of Plan B on Donald Trump's part, which is that he does what he suggested 4 or 5 days ago at one of his rallies he was thinking about doing, which is leaving the country. If so, what country does he move to? Does he go to Turkey, where he's got a couple of hotels and he makes $2 million a year? And Erdogan threatened to pull those hotels if Trump didn't stab the Kurds in the back. So Trump just turned around and said to Turkey, fine, slaughter our allies. We've been fighting with the Kurds for 20 years. Slaughter them, no problem. And of course, Erdogan and the Turks went in and slaughtered the Kurds. And we have the footage. The international news organizations, as the Kurds went by and they saw American reporters, they gave us the finger. I mean, does he do that? Does he move to Turkey? Does he move to Russia and build his Trump Tower Moscow that he's been dreaming of for so long? Does he move to the Philippines, where Duterte has now admitted that thousands of people were murdered by police under his own orders? He said, yeah, I'm willing to go to jail for this. He's quite proud of it. Does he go to India, where Modi has embraced him? Where does he go? I think he's got a lot of possibilities. My sense of it is that all the voter suppression in the world isn't going to save him. I think that this election is fairly cooked. I know everybody's talking about the polls are tightening. Yeah, of course the polls are tightening. Shelley Adelson's $75 million just hit all the Republican senators' campaigns. They're pouring money into television advertising. The Trump campaign has basically stopped spending money. They know which way the wind is blowing. They're going to put that money in their pocket, just like they did with the inaugural balls. They raised twice as much money as Obama and spent about 1/8 as much as Obama. And people are still trying to figure out what happened to $100 million. I guarantee you it ended up in Donald Trump's pocket, or Ivanka's, or Don Jr.'s, or Eric's. But here's one of the things that tells me that this isn't going to go so well for Donald Trump. Admiral William McRaven, he's now retired. He was a Navy SEAL. He was the commander of the Navy SEALs, the so-called U.S. Special Operations Command, which runs the Navy SEALs. And he oversaw the killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011. This is the most badass of the badass guys that we have in our military, Admiral William McRaven. And he wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, popped up yesterday. And here's what he has to say. He says, he's by the way, the last sentence of this op-ed was, I vote for Joe Biden. But here's what he says. He says, truth be told, I am pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, small government, strong defense, and a national anthem standing conservative. But I also believe that Black lives matter, that the Dreamers deserve a path to citizenship, that diversity and inclusion are essential to our national success, that education is the great equalizer, that climate change is real, and that the First Amendment is the cornerstone of our democracy. Most important, I believe that America must lead in the world with courage, conviction, and a sense of honor and humility. Now the world no longer looks up to America. They've been witness to our dismissiveness, our lack of respect, and our transactional approach to global issues. They've seen us tear up our treaties, leave our allies on the battlefield. I was just speaking of the Kurds, right? And cozy up to despots and dictators. They've seen our incompetence in handling the pandemic and the wildfires. They've seen us struggle with social justice. They no longer think we can lead because they've seen an ineptness and a disdain for civility that is beyond anything in their memory. Admiral William McRaven. Meanwhile, Trump's eighth wonder of the world, Judd Legum's newsletter today, Foxconn got $4 billion from the state of Wisconsin to build this, what Trump calls the eighth wonder of the world, this giant factory. The land was taken from local landowners by the state of Wisconsin. Scott Walker gave them hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks and actual cash. Foxconn built a building. The building is now empty. It's a warehouse. Trump was in Wisconsin yesterday or the day before, I think it was the day before yesterday, and he said, this is going to turn into a great factory, but only if I'm reelected. He's lying through his teeth. It was a scam that Scott Walker ran to try to get himself reelected. I mean, this is what the Republican Party has reduced itself to. Scams and hustlers.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Can they survive? How will the Republican Party have to reinvent itself? How does America make it through this with a party that has become so corrupt?
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle
Hi, for our book club
Forward
today,
by
we're reading from
Yika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe through a bourgeois sense of reasoning that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements. And none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon, War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon, but why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just one about your iCloud account and the other about your Social Security account. Well, this is, that's a cautionary tale, right? I'm warning you. This is a cautionary tale. Jeffrey Toobin didn't realize the camera was on his computer and, shall we say, had a good time in front of a whole bunch of people. He has now been bounced out of where he was, CNN and The New Yorker. But here's another one. This from The Guardian. A municipal councilor in northern Spain has offered to resign after inadvertently broadcasting video of himself showering during an online city council meeting that was being live streamed. Bernardo Bustillo, the meeting started in the morning, but as it stretched past midday, he began to fret he wouldn't have time to shower before taking his daughter to work and for his job as a swim instructor. So he took his computer in the bathroom with him so that he could listen to the conference as it was going on and set it on the sink and took a shower, not realizing that he had forgotten to turn the camera off. The sound of running water drowned out the constant ringing of his mobile phone. His frantic colleagues tried to warn him that the camera was still rolling.
A wave of discomfort rippled across the video chat as he got out of the shower in front of the camera. So there's that. And there's another one last month. Irish Member of Parliament Luke Ming Flanagan beamed images of himself without trousers on the European Parliament's official live cast. We have had 3 different guests on this program. One of these made it on the air. The other 2, we just, it just caused shock for our poor people working on the video end of our program. We've had 3 different guests on our program over the last couple of years where they would come on the show, they would do a hit using Skype or Zoom on the TV side, on the video side of our program, and then they would stand up and they weren't wearing pants. It's like, oh my God. So anyway, be careful, right? There's something to be said here about being careful. So let's pick up your phone calls here. Peter in Waldorf, Virginia. Hey, Peter, what's on your mind today?
No, I'm in Maryland. How are you, sir?
Oh, Maryland. I'm sorry. I'm well. What's up?
Hey, I got to disagree with you. If Trump loses,
Okay.
I can tell you this. On January 21st, he's going to be in either the Southern District of New York's court or in one of their at least a handful of civil cases facing him. He's going to be spending so much time in court, he's not going to have time to buy a TV station. In addition to that, I think that this money, he knows he's not going to have William Barr to cover for him anymore. He's going to have an army of attorneys, and that's going to cost him a fortune. And lastly, let's hope. Thank you. Let's hope that he absolutely ends up in jail.
Yeah, well, it looks like he's heading that direction, Peter, and that's why I'm wondering which country he's going to. I think the other day when he said, if I lose, I might have to leave the country, I think he was being dead serious. He has a long habit when he's not, just blowing out complete fantasy lies. He has a long habit, particularly with the bad stuff he's up to, of just basically telegraphing it so that nobody's shocked when it happens. I think, frankly, that's his strategy. But,
but I don't
we'll see. We'll see. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. The damn latency here. There's about a quarter-second delay between you and me, and I heard you in my ear after I had already disconnected you and moved on to Angela in New York City. Hey, Angela, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? First off, I just wanted to say that I agree with you about, I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now, that I think that should he lose, and I am nervous about the election, I still think they're going to try and pull off some type of, he's going to try and pull off a win somehow. But should he lose, I get the feeling that he is, he's going to take the money and run. Like the old song says, take the money and run. He's going to get out of the country. And I don't see him going to, I've been talking about this with friends, and, they're holding me to my prediction, actually. There's money on this. I told him it's not going to be Saudi Arabia, it's not going to be Russia, it's not going to be any large country. I think it's going to be a smaller country, and I think it's going to be someplace where he's going to be extremely miserable. And I really feel like he doesn't want to be reelected. If you look at the way his rallies are going and the way he's talking, I mean, sometimes I look at it and I say, he can't be for real, the things that he's saying. It's almost like he's phoning it in and just saying ridiculous things and getting the crowds riled up, and then he just goes off stage or whatever. I just feel like he's wanting to get out of here.
He's solidifying his customer base, Angela. I really think that all this crazy stuff, we look at it and go, it's crazy stuff. His hardcore followers, and there's probably maybe 10 million of them in the United States, more or less. His hardcore followers are going to follow him wherever he goes. So, his wife and his son both have Slovenian citizenship in addition to their American citizenship, both, Melania and Baron. And so let's say they move to Slovenia. He could still do a TV show from Slovenia. He could, he can still sell merchandise from Slovenia. So wherever he goes, I think he's just getting ready. I mean, I think these guys are feathering their nests right now as fast as they possibly can. The campaign is rerouting $180,000 a year to Don Jr.'s girlfriend and to Eric's wife. Everybody has got their fingers in the till. They're all figuring out ways to squeeze cash out of this thing. So
exactly.
It just seems fairly.
I'm still worried about the election, though. There's a big part of me that is not going to, I'm losing sleep over this, is not going to rest until this is over and he's gone. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes people are jumping the gun by making all these post-election plans. I keep saying, wait, just, let's just consider this for a second, because the GOP is doing everything they can to suppress voters. And I see it every day, and I'm very worried about it. But I do feel at this point, or I do see that Trump he's going to go. And he can't go to Russia, because if he goes to Russia, he's going to get the Putin retirement plan. We know what that is. Okay. It's not a very good plan, and it doesn't come with many benefits. And, windows are very scary.
Right.
So that's about it.
Yeah, no, I spot on. Angela, thank you. I think you made some very, very good points. Ramesu in Birmingham, Alabama. Hey, Ramesu, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I hope you're well.
So far, so good.
Hey, I understand. I'm here in Birmingham. I was recuperating from COVID, and something crossed my mind. Mr. Trump is on record with Bob Woodward stating that he knew about the deadliness of the coronavirus back in February. He didn't want to alarm the American public. However, he told some of his close friends and some of the corporate bigwigs. Isn't that insider trading?
It is, but there is an exception to the insider trading laws for members of Congress and the president. But I'm convinced that this is, that Wilbur Ross, that all these guys in the cabinet have been trading on inside information for 4 years now. And in fact, I'm convinced that the entire Trump family has been trading on insider information.
Right. I do understand the Congress. However, some of his close friends who are not in the Congress, in like corporate heads, we can go after them for inside trading. And Mr. Trump,
possibly,
if he is not reelected, I think the only country he goes to is Russia, because he would not enjoy a Middle Eastern country. So Russia's it.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a pretty good chance of that, Ramesu. And and he's wanted to build a Trump Tower there, and makes perfect sense. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and thoughts and mine right after this. Got to tell you about a bar owner who's upset with Don Jr.
To Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Kyle in Port Orchard, Florida. Hey, Kyle, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I'm actually in Washington, but I appreciate it.
Okay. It says Washington here. My apologies, Kyle.
That's okay, Tom. You made a point earlier, and this is something my dad and I have been talking about every night. Trump's exit strategy. And I kind of tended to believe if he loses the election, he's going to book, he's going to quit, and Pence will pardon him. But doesn't he have to be charged with a crime and actually be found guilty? I know that's the way presidential pardons work. I thought. Okay. Explain.
No, Nixon was never charged with a crime.
That's where I'm stuck, is I'm only 50, and I was kind of a kid when that went down. So that's the answer, I guess.
Yeah, and not only did Jerry Ford pardon Nixon for any crimes that they were in essentially the process of exposing, he pardoned him for all crimes. So when it came out later that Nixon had taken a $500,000 bribe from the milk lobby, and this was back in 1960 when he was, the vice president and he was running for president. When that came out, he could skate free. When it came out that Jimmy Hoffa had given him a $500,000 bribe, he skated on that. I mean, all these crimes that came out after the fact that we learned about later. And Nixon just got to skate on all of them because the rule became, you're pardoned for any federal crime, period. Anything you might have committed in the past, and right up until this point. I don't know if they could.
How in the world did we allow that? Yeah, how in the world?
Well, it's in the Constitution. It's literally the last fragment of the Constitution that's left over from British royalty. And you read the debates in the Constitutional Convention. It's fascinating. Madison's notes are online, and you can track them down, and they're very easy. It's plain English. You can very easily read these things. And Madison did a very good job of keeping track of who said what and why. And basically what they were afraid of, or what they were trying to do, they thought that there were. I say they. This is the problem. It's like originalism. There's no monolithic they among the founders and framers. But there was a faction, and Alexander Hamilton actually represented that faction fairly well. So well that when there was a faction that believed that the presidency should be more like the monarchy, that wow. Constitutional monarchies were actually probably good things. And Hamilton argued in the first week of the convention that the presidency should be a lifetime appointment, and that the president should be addressed as His Highness, not His Royal Highness, but His Highness. And right. He was basically laughed out of the room for that. He got so angry, he was so insulted by it, that he went back to New York and didn't come back until the last couple weeks of the convention. He just absented himself. But the one bone that they threw to Hamilton and his little band of people who later became called Federalists, the conservatives of the day, was to put the pardon power in there for the president. That's the one power that kings have that exists in our Constitution. So that's how it happened, Kyle.
It's kind of amazing. Well, I appreciate that, and I got some research to do.
Yeah, okay. Good talking with you. Thanks a lot for the call. I mean, it really is. When you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, you can get away with crimes if you're president? That's kind of sweet. As Donald Trump is going, yeah. And here's the other thing. Trump may not have to resign and put Pence in order to get pardoned. He may be able to pardon himself. One of the questions that they asked Amy Coney Barrett was, does the president have the power to pardon himself? And she said, I'm not going to tell you. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. So over at ThomHartmann.com, we just put up a new video for our supporters, the people who support our program, that talks about Malcolm X saying, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are the oppressors. He said that 55 years ago to, this month, February. In 1965, and what that actually means, how that warning from Malcolm X was apparently taken to heart by the Republican Party in 1981 through the Reagan presidency, and we actually saw this shift in America to the point where that led to everything. Stop and frisk, and the demonization of homeless people, and the demonization of poor people, and black people, and Muslim people, and all of this stuff. Came out of this very specific kind of Lee Atwater strategy in the 1980s. So you can find it over at ThomHartmann.com and check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is 9 minutes before the hour. John in Richland, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I heard you earlier read a letter from a military gentleman, and briefly, one of the things... It
was the commander of the Navy SEALs.
Yeah, he was involved with the bin Laden operation.
He was in charge of it.
Okay. I just couldn't remember it very well. One of the things that really jumped out to me, what he said was that education is the great equalizer, and I couldn't agree with it more. And I think a great example of that, and as I was kind of waiting to talk to you, I heard you speaking about Malcolm X and the Lee Atwater stuff as well. And I feel like it kind of it speaks to it as well about the if you're not careful, you'll start to hate the oppressed and love the oppressors. It goes along with one of the things that makes me so angry. I feel like education is the root of everything. And the powers that be want to kind of keep us in our drone mentality so that we just work and make the money for capitalist society. But one thing that stands out to me is, like, we blame Russia and Facebook for tricking us in the 2016 election, when in reality, if we just paid a little bit more attention to educating our children and our masses, we wouldn't be so easily tricked.
Good point. Good point. And this in my mind, a lot of this goes back to the 1980s when Ronald Reagan put Bill Bennett in charge of the Education Department after Bennett had publicly run for president in either 80 or 84, calling for the elimination of the Education Department. So, of course, Reagan put him in charge of it. And the first thing he did was gutted the standards for civics education in the United States. We have a generation, maybe two generations of young Americans, or of Americans who, when they were young people growing up, never learned about the three branches of government, never learned all the very important things out there. So I think it's a real tragedy. John, thank you. Excellent point. Israel in Chandler, Arizona. Hey, Israel, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I just wanted to address your rant earlier this morning on voting rights. And I think that depending on whether or not we take all three branches of the government, the Congress and the presidency, come January, the Congress could pass an act addressing all of the major issues about voting rights, prescribing in terms of paper balloting, for example, other things like that to secure it. But in addition to that, add in a clause that states the affirmative right of every American citizen to vote. And then cite chapter and verse from all of the amendments in the Constitution that address the right to vote of different classes. Mm-hmm. Having done that, they can say, because this is constitutional, we determine it's constitutional, the right to vote, the Supreme Court doesn't need to review this at all. And I think it would also put the Supreme Court on notice of saying, you're not the only branch of government that can determine constitutionality of federal legislation. And I think that would be important.
You're talking about jurisdiction stripping, and I'm totally with you on that, Joe. I don't expect it to happen any day soon, but yeah, I'm with you. And H.R. 1 actually goes a long way toward that. The first piece of legislation that the Democrats passed out of the House of Representatives in this congressional session.
Exactly.
And they're all talking about reprising that for, January of next year, which would be a very, very, very good thing. We've got to nail down our right to vote. It's so wrong what's going on. Israel, thanks for the call. Very well said. Joe in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Joe, I understand you had a super spreader in your backyard yesterday.
Yes, we did. Tom, I honestly believe that Trump is counting on voting machines being hacked, either by the Russians or the Republicans. And to prove
I think that's a piece of it, Joe. I think that's always been a small piece of it. I don't think, though, I mean, up until around 2004 or 2005, most of us, you look at the red shift that happens all over the country, and most of us thought, oh, this is the result of voting machines being hacked. Turns out, now that we've, in retrospect, we can look back and see how it all really works. Turns out it's actually people being thrown off the voting rolls, their names being purged for no good reason. They live in a big city, or they have a black or Hispanic last name, or Asian or Native American. So their name gets purged. They go to vote. The Help America Vote Act requires them to be given a provisional ballot, but it also says provisional ballots don't have to be counted. And, in most states, in most red states, they never count the provisional ballots. They just never get around, unless there's a lawsuit, they don't do it. So those people vote the provisional ballot, not knowing it's not going to be counted. They tell the pollsters, yeah, I just voted for, in the case of 2016, Hillary Clinton. And if you look at the exit polls, Hillary Clinton won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election. But, when you take out the people who had been purged from the voting rolls, so you don't count those votes, suddenly Donald Trump wins all four of those states. That's the main strategy that they're using this time. It's the strategy that they've been using since the 2000 election. And that is my biggest concern right now. We need to put an end to that. But I'm with you, Joe. Thank you very much for the call. I think that the Republicans are planning on a whole bunch of stuff. And, insecurity of voting machines is part of it, particularly in Georgia. No paper trail machines and stuff like that. But it's so much bigger than that. That's why I wrote this whole book about it, Hidden History of the War on Voting. We'll be back. We're going to talk about what's going on in Central and South America.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Right-wing Republicans and corporate Democrats have become a pathetic bunch of no-can-do Nancys. Faced with an economy reeling from the plutocratic policies that these same lawmakers push down upon us, they are now whimpering that America is too weak to meet the obvious needs of its own people. We must surrender to the gods of economic despair, they cry. At a time when history calls for our leaders to step forth with a bit of FDR boldness and rally grassroots people to rebuild our economy, they trumpet for retreat, giving up on America's historic ideal of the common good. A jobs program? Everyone for themselves, they shout. Health care for all? Go to the emergency room, they scream. Social Security? Socialism, they screech. Run away from it. Public education? Can't afford it, they tell us, as they turn their backs on hundreds of thousands of teachers soon to be fired. Repair America's rotting infrastructure? Too big for us, they wail. Leave it to the next generation. Wagging tea bags rather than picking up the tools of real recovery, the woeful voices of American failure insist that they speak for the people. Hogwash. Americans are a strong, community-minded, democratic-spirited, can-do people. Indeed, the latest Gallup poll shows that 60% of the public favors, quote, additional government spending to create jobs and stimulate the economy. But we must balance the budget, whine the naysayers. Of course we should, and big majorities say we should do that by putting people to work, taxing the super-rich to pay their fair share of Social Security and other public needs, as well as by slashing the $12 billion a month we're spending for wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is Jim Hightower saying it's time for these so-called leaders to stop whining and catch up to the people.
Our book today is Playing with Fire, the 1968 election and the transformation of American politics by Lawrence O'Donnell. The first chapter, Seizing the Moment, it starts in 1968. Richard Nixon was in a makeup chair when he met Roger Ailes. Maybe it was the makeup chair that set Ailes off. He was looking at the man who might have been president right now if he had just sat in the makeup chair CBS offered him in Chicago before the first televised presidential debate in American history. Nixon had ignored the network's makeup artist and used a drugstore product called Lazy Shave to cover his heavy 5 o'clock shadow. Nixon once said, "I can shave within 30 seconds before I go on television and still have a beard." The day after the debate, the Chicago Daily News ran the headline, "Was Nixon sabotaged by TV makeup artists?" Richard Daley, the all-powerful Democratic mayor of Chicago, said, "My God, they've embalmed him even before he died." Nixon lost the election to John F. Kennedy by 0.2% of the vote, 49.7% to 49.5%. In an election that close, every mistake matters. A mistake like not getting the makeup right was the kind of thing that infuriated Roger Ailes. Now, 7 years later, Ailes was meeting Nixon for the first time in the makeup room of the Mike Douglas show. At age 26, Ailes looked like an assistant, but he was the boss, the executive producer of the show. And Nixon was once again a presidential candidate in what was beginning to look like a crowded field covering the 1968 Republican nomination. Ailes wanted Nixon to be president, and he knew the most powerful force blocking Nixon's path to the White House was television. To win the White House in the 1960s, you had to understand and respect the power of television. Ailes also knew that one of Nixon's potential rivals for the Republican nomination understood everything about television, Ronald Reagan, the former film and TV actor. Ailes wondered what Nixon had learned about TV since the makeup disaster of the 1960 campaign. Sitting in the makeup chair, Nixon offhandedly mentioned to Ailes how silly it felt to try to reach voters by appearing on an afternoon talk show like this one instead of a news show like Meet the Press. The Mike Douglas show is targeted at housewives and usually populated by B-list showbiz celebrities. In response, Ailes instantly rattled off a list of every bad move Nixon had ever made on TV, and it was a long list. Ailes was a teenager when he'd seen some of these things. This was not the way people talked to former Vice President Richard Milhous Nixon. There was none of the deference Nixon had become accustomed to over the decades, and Nixon loved it. Nixon made Ailes an offer he couldn't refuse. Instead of trying to make Mike Douglas America's biggest afternoon TV star, make Richard Nixon America's next president. With Ailes on the media team, the Nixon campaign was ready to make the move from being the worst TV campaign to the best. We're going to build this whole campaign around television, Nixon told his media team. You boys just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Roger Ailes' career in Republican politics, which included every day he ran Fox News, turned out to be longer than Richard Nixon's. Ailes became more influential in Republican politics than Nixon ever was. We have reason to wonder who would be president today if Richard Nixon had not provoked Roger Ailes in the Mike Douglas show makeup room. Such are the seeds that were planted in American politics in the 1968 presidential campaign. Run, Bobby, Run is the subhead for the next part of this. Bobby was a natural on television. In 1967, he was the only potential presidential candidate who could charm a TV audience just by being himself. All he needed was his smile. Bobby was the Elvis of American politics, the only politician who didn't need a last name to identify him. But his last name was everything. It was Bobby Kennedy's last name that made every potential candidate fear him. As the field of candidates began to take shape in 1967, every campaign calculation depended on Bobby, even when he showed no signs of wanting to run, even when he told people he wasn't going to run. President Lyndon Baines Johnson feared Bobby to the point of obsession. Johnson thought Bobby was the only one who could do the unthinkable, challenge the incumbent president's grip on the Democratic nomination. Johnson was sure that Bobby was the only Democrat who might dare run against him. He was wrong. Nixon feared Bobby too, as did every Republican planning a campaign. Nixon knew exactly what to fear. He had lost to a Kennedy before. Losing to a Kennedy meant losing to the Kennedy political machine, and it meant losing it to the Kennedy style. A political machine can be beaten by a better political machine, though Nixon had never seen a better political machine than the Kennedys. Kennedy's style was something else. Nixon knew there was nothing Ailes could do for his image that could compete with Kennedy's style. Nixon couldn't change his sharply receding hairline. At 54, he was too old to do anything but tamp down his short, dark hair as flat as possible on his head. Bobby's hair had grown longer every year of the 1960s. Now at 42, he had the shaggiest hair in the United States Senate. His little brother Ted was the only other senator with a full head of hair. Bobby's hair was beginning to grow over his ears, rock musician length for the Senate then. And everywhere Bobby spoke outside the Senate chamber, he was treated like a rock star. That's what Nixon and Johnson feared most about Bobby, the way the crowds responded to him. They'd never seen anything like it in politics. Nixon and Johnson were both old enough to remember the first time anyone saw fans screaming and swooning for Frank Sinatra in the 1940s before, during, and after every song Sinatra sang. America saw an even more intense version of that fan reaction when the Beatles landed in the United States in 1964. And now Nixon and Johnson saw a version of it happening to Bobby. Everywhere Bobby went, crowds worked themselves into frenzies. When he spoke, he didn't sound like any senator they'd heard before. His voice wasn't stiff and self-conscious. The book Playing with Fire by Lawrence O'Donnell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is our old buddy Mark Weisbrot. He is the big cheese over at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, the co-director. He's also the president of Just Foreign Policy, the author of several books. His most recent, Failed: What the Experts Got Wrong About the Global Economy. CEPR.net is their website. And Mark, welcome back. Bolivia. Evo Morales is out, but progressive policies may be back in. First of all, for people who are not, who don't follow the situation in South America and Bolivia, the country of Bolivia and the continent of South America, for people who aren't following that, give us a real quick thumbnail backgrounder and then bring us up to date.
Sure. Well, Evo Morales was the first indigenous president of Bolivia, and it's the most indigenous by percent of population country in the hemisphere. It's somewhere near a majority, and of the population is indigenous. And he was elected in 2005 and took office in January 2006. And he was there for all the way till the end of 2019. In November of 2019, he was overthrown in a coup where the military told him to step down, to resign. And I have to emphasize that because it's, you see there's reports in the media, and they don't even, most of them don't even refer to it as a coup. Some of them do. And it was a coup that was backed by the Trump administration, and it was also engineered to a large part in at least the foundations of it, were made by the Organization of American States, which sent an electoral observer mission to the country, which is supposed to observe the election that they had on October 20th. But instead, they lied about it and promoted this idea that it was stolen, and that became the political foundation for the coup. And then there was a de facto repressive government for the past 11 months, but after there were big protests in the streets that shut down highways and everything, the de facto government was forced to actually have an election on Sunday, and there the finance minister, or the economy minister of Evo Morales, his name is Luis Arce, ran for president, and he won in the election on Sunday. So that's a huge thing. It was a little unexpected because the polls showed that he was in the lead, that he wouldn't get enough to win the first round, but he did win in the first round. But he clearly did at this point, although the votes are still being counted. There's quick counts that show that he won by a large margin, probably over 20 percentage points. And so this is a major turnaround of a U.S.-backed coup against a left government. And that has a lot of significance for the whole hemisphere, which we can talk about if you want.
Yeah, as both an economist and a fairly astute political observer, particularly of this region, Mark Weisbrot, what does this say to you about, well, first of all, U.S. foreign policy? Why is it that we keep overthrowing leftist governments that are not, embracing Castro-style communism? Although even Castro, or it's no longer the Castro government, but I mean, even the current government of Cuba is no longer embracing Castro-style. They're allowing free enterprise on the island. But why do we keep doing that? And what? I mean, who are the interest groups behind this? Why would the United States interfere in the affairs of a foreign country to prevent them from having, my sense of it was that, Morales was just basically building out a Denmark-style government, not a Cuba-style government. Or do I have that wrong?
No, it was a social, and will continue to be, hopefully. There's no reason to think that Arce would do differently. It's the same party.
But it's like democratic socialism, right?
The movement for socialism, yeah, it's a social democratic system where it's a mixed economy, like almost every economy in the world is a mixture of state and market. And so, yes, it isn't that there's nothing radical or even threatening in any other way as you could imagine. A country of 11.5 million people in South America that's a lower middle income country posing with the rest of the United States. None of the excuses that you see, you don't even make excuses that just deny it. But the U.S. has intervened. The U.S. government has intervened in almost all of the countries, the left governments that were elected in the 21st century, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Paraguay, and of course Venezuela more than anywhere.
Chile.
And
was that the Monroe Doctrine, that if it happens in this hemisphere, it's our affair?
Well, I think that you do have a consensus in the so-called national security state, or what Ben Rhodes called the civil society equivalent of it. Ben Rhodes was Obama's advisor, and he called it the blob. And the consensus in the blog, which includes, most of the media and the big think tanks, which most of them get U.S. government funding. And anyway, the consensus is that this belongs to the United States. They don't even really think about it that much. They don't think.
So what are the implications? You forgive me for moving along here, Mark, but we just have 2 minutes until we're going to hit a break that I can't control. You mentioned the implications of Bolivia flipping essentially back to a democratic socialist or social democratic government. What does that mean for the rest of South America?
Well, I think it's very important because, it could be tremendously important because in the 21st century, you had for the first time the majority of the population of Latin America was governed by left of center governments, social democratic governments like this one to varying degrees. I mean, some, did more in terms of, they all had different sets of reforms, public investment. They, for example, in Bolivia, they drastically increased public investment. They invested more. These governments invested more in healthcare. The ones I mentioned just now in terms of where the U.S. intervened, they invested more in education. And they did the things that you would expect social democratic middle-income countries to do, but it varied by country because they had different needs. And they had different capacities. And so, and then they were, some are at a more industrial stage of development. For example, Argentina was more developed than most of the others in terms of manufacturing. But the point is that they all were a reflection of what the voters really wanted after a long-term, terrible, almost unprecedented economic failure from 1980 to 2000. It sounds
you finish your thought.
Your break is coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So that's what they did, and the United States government strategy under both the Bush and Obama administrations, then more violently under Trump, was to get rid of all of them as much as they could. Containment and rollback.
Mark, I got to wrap it up, but thank you so much. Hang on just a second, Mark. We're going to get stepped on here.
The Thom Hartmann Program.
Mark Weisbrot, the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He's got a piece coming out about this in The Nation magazine. You can check it out, and CEPR.net. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Joyce screened my calls. How cool. Oh, we are live. Thank you. Welcome back. Yeah. Oh, it's one of those days, right? Let's see here. Trying to find the call. Here we go. Wynn in Solon, Maine. Hey, Wynn, what's on your mind today?
Hey, what's on my mind is I am still, after 4+ years of struggling, trying to figure out how these Trump supporters think. He never seems to complete a sentence, so how can anybody understand him? But in any case, you keep bringing up the fact that what he's trying to do is promote himself to build his customer base post-election when he feels probably he's going to lose. I understand him using that platform for that mechanism, but I don't understand how that works. How does he ever convince people to rent his motel rooms, his hotel rooms, or whatever? How does that work? How does what he's doing, acting like a jackass, ever get him in better position down the road? I cannot make that connection. If you could dive deeper into that and explain that, that would be great.
Yeah, what he has done, Wynn, is he's essentially created a cult around himself. Right. Like I said earlier, I mean, there's 340 million people in America. I doubt there are even a full 10 million people who are like deeply in the cult. But, okay. And weekly in the cult, maybe as many as 20 or 30 million people, but certainly between 5 and 10 million hardcore followers. And when you've got 5 or 10 million hardcore followers, you can sell a lot of stuff to them. You can sell them books, you can sell them videos, you can sell them a TV network where they can subscribe for $50 a month and get the TV network on internet, or $50 a year. And if you can get, 1 million people, that's $50 million a year just in subscription revenue. I mean, you can go to NBC and say, put me on television and I'll cut a deal with you. In fact, there was some speculation last week or 2 weeks ago that one of the reasons why NBC gave Trump a slot opposite Biden when the night that they were supposed to have the debate was the influence of Mark Burnett, who's still producing one of NBC's most highly rated programs, and that Burnett has cut a deal in the background with Trump, for a program post-presidency. Now, nobody knows if that's the case. I certainly don't know. But, that was some of the speculation that was floating around in the media, and particularly in social media. But there's all kinds of, keep in mind, everything Donald Trump approaches, his question is, how can I extract money from this? During the primary.
How does he actually convince these people to give him money and stuff like that by acting like a jackass? I don't get it.
But see, you and I think he's acting like a jackass. His followers think he's telling it like it is. He's cutting through the BS. Did you ever see the movie Bulworth?
No.
Okay, there's this movie Bulworth, and I want to say George Clooney's starring in it, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But in any case, the movie is about this politician who just tells the truth. He has some kind of an experience. I don't remember what it is. He knocks his head on the wall or takes a drug or whatever it is. And he just decides, he can't help himself. He starts telling the truth. And at first, everybody thinks, oh, my God, it's going to be a political disaster. And he turns out to be insanely popular as a result of it. He's just telling people the truth. Well, that's who his followers think Trump is. They think that he's absolutely telling the truth. And frankly, it's because in a couple of cases, like, hey, we're being screwed by China and 40 years of free trade, he actually is telling the truth. So, he's got all kinds of things to sell him, Win. Win, I got to run, but thank you. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and the essence of it is, I use a couple of examples. There's hundreds of them out there. In one case, Alabama is preparing to execute a man who was not guilty of the crime that he committed with a relatively high level of certainty, but still they're gonna kill this guy, an African American. And the other story out of New York State where the police officers hogtied this guy, arms, elbows behind him, tied his legs together, and then threw him down a flight of stairs, mangled his face. He looked he was totally beaten. 12 hours later, he commits suicide in his cell. How is it possible that our prisons do this kind of stuff? Because the 13th Amendment says that slavery is still legal in the United States. You have no rights if you've been convicted of a crime. We need to amend the Constitution. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it is a strange time, to say the very least. And Pat Robertson is doing his very best to make it even stranger. The televangelist who is worth $1 billion because he built a multi-million-dollar television evangelism business. I call it a business because it's a nonprofit. You and I have been subsidizing Pat Roberts his entire career, his entire lifetime. And he's still doing this show. He's 90 years old, and he's still doing the 700 Club, which I guess, is kind of a testimonial to persistence, if nothing else. And he said that Trump is going to, he's certain Trump is going to win the election on November 3rd. And then comes the end of the world. Yes. Oh, boy. Well, hey, he's 90 years old. It's like, the world's going to end. Yeah. Well, The world's definitely going to end for him sooner than it probably will for most of us. But anyhow, back in 1976. He was forecasting that the world would end in October of 1982. He ran that train for 6 years. The world didn't end. And so then in 1990, he said the world's going to end on April 29th, 2007. And, that got him 17 good years in there, and built his empire, his whole televangelism thing. And now he's saying, we've never seen the like of it before, but I want to relate to you again. There is going to be a war. Ezekiel 38 is going to be the next thing down the line. I'm saying, by all means, get out and vote. You ask what's going to happen next, that's what's going to happen next. Vote for whoever you want to vote for, but let your voice be heard. It's going to lead to civil unrest and then a war against Israel and so forth. I think it's time to pray. Yeah, I'm starting to think it's time to pray, too. And I mentioned this bar owner, by the way. People are like, in fact, I opened the program by saying, you've got all these consultants and political pundits and whatnot, and they're on MSNBC and CNN going, I can't figure out what Trump is doing. Why is he running around taking pot shots at Anthony Fauci? Everybody loves Anthony Fauci. Why would he say that? That's political suicide. He's ruining the Republican Party. Trump doesn't give a rat's ass about the Republican Party. And the Republican Party is starting to figure this out. John Cornyn is like, it's like, a bad marriage, right? You marry somebody and you think you can change them, and then you discover you can't. And Ben Sass, just peeling the bark off Trump. I tweeted this morning to Ben Sass, actually at Senator Sass, saying, if you want to show some real political courage, become the third Republican vote to block Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. I doubt he's going to do it, but I thought I'd toss it out there. I haven't looked at Twitter since I posted that about an hour and a half ago. I'll have to check it out. But people are like, why is Trump doing this? Why is he doing these super spreader events? Why is he going into these various cities and having people pack in as densely as possible? Well, because, number one, he still has some small hope that he can win the election, right? He still has this small hope that it's possible he can win the election. And so his plan, or part of the plan, is, this is the Trump Chaos 101, part of the plan is just, if you can terrify the Democrats and reassure the Republicans with regard to the virus, then the Democrats won't show up to vote and the Republicans will. So if Trump is thinking, if I can hold a big rally in Tucson, Arizona, and pack people in wall to wall, and all that stuff goes up on television, then all of the people who watch on Fox News, all the hardcore followers, they'll say, oh, well, it must not be such a big deal. Look at that. There's 1,000 people who realize it's not a big deal. And Trump is the leader of this. So, it's not a big deal for me. I've noticed just here in Portland, Louise and I have noticed in the last, I'd say 2 weeks, the percentage of people not wearing masks that we pass on public streets and on various trails and paths that we walk every day when we take our 2-mile walk. And by the way, if you're not walking at least a mile every day, you are doing a huge disservice to your body and mind. But anyhow, the number of people without masks has probably doubled in 2 weeks. And I think it's because of these things. Trump is setting an example. So anyhow, there's this bar owner in Wisconsin, Mark Schultz, and he hosted a Donald Trump Jr. event in his bar, and now he's in the ICU. And he said, I don't worry about much about me, but I got a 10-year-old son and my fiance. That's what I care about. My family, they're all at home. They're all worried about me. Speaking of Donald Trump, he says, I just want to punch him. I always had to keep my politics to myself, but from where I'm sitting now in the ICU, those days are over. I shouldn't be here. Donald Trump Jr., who himself had COVID, you'll recall, a few weeks ago, came to this bar and did a super spreader event. Now the owner of the bar is in the ICU in Wisconsin. Well, here's the thing. As part of Trump's math on this, as part of his equation on this, the people who are going to get sick from the super spreader events and the people who are going to die, for over the next 2 weeks from these events. They're not going to show up for weeks, for a month.
The Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It'll be 3, 4, 5 weeks before you start seeing the hospital admissions start going up. It'll be 8 or 9 weeks before you start seeing the deaths. He's just betting on that.
For our book club today, we're reading from a book by Elizabeth Holtzman, one of the former U.S. congresswomen who sat on the committee that considered impeaching Richard Nixon. And this book is titled The Case for Impeaching Trump. Just came out. This is from the first chapter titled Impeachment. When Donald Trump's presidential election victory was announced in the early morning hours of November 9, 2016, like many Americans, I rubbed my eyes in disbelief and dismay. 2 questions raced through my mind. What had become of America that a man so unfit, so small-minded, so mean-spirited could be elected? A man whose ethnic and racial bigotry had set the stage for his presidential run when he called Mexicans rapists and made racist birther attacks on President Barack Obama, whose vulgarity and misogyny were laid bare in the Access Hollywood tape when he bragged about forcibly grabbing women by their genitals, whose performance at presidential debates showed him not only flagrantly ill-informed, but manifestly unwilling to get informed? My second question was about how much harm this man would do to America as its 45th president. I have my answer now to the latter, less than 2 years after the election. President Trump has damaged American democracy far more than I would have guessed. He has refused to protect our system of free elections from foreign interference. He has relentlessly attacked the administration of justice, in particular the investigation into a possible conspiracy with Russia regarding the 2016 presidential election, putting himself above the rule of law. He has failed to separate his personal business from the country's, flaunting the Constitution's requirements. And he has violated the constitutional rights of the people in separating children from parents at the southwest border without due process of law. And to cover up these misdeeds, he has systematically lied to and assailed the press. These are great and dangerous offenses that the framers of our Constitution wanted to counteract and thwart. They provided a powerful remedy: impeachment. Many tremble at the word, fearing how President Trump's supporters will react to an impeachment inquiry, worrying that it will only further polarize an already deeply divided nation, or that there will not be enough votes in the Senate to convict him if the House of Representatives votes to impeach. Just calling for an inquiry will be viewed as a Democratic Party attack on the head of another party, a kind of coup d'etat. It's easy to find reasons to be anxious, but I'm not afraid. As a junior congresswoman, the youngest ever elected at that time, I served on the House Judiciary Committee that voted to impeach President Richard Nixon for the high crimes and misdemeanors he committed in connection with the Watergate cover-up and other matters. Through thorough, fair, and above all bipartisan, the committee acted on solid evidence presented in televised hearings that riveted the nation, handing us the blueprint for how impeachment can be successfully pursued today. In our 225 years of constitutional democracy, the Nixon impeachment process has been proven to be the only presidential effort that worked. Though Nixon resigned, the only president ever to do so, 2 weeks after the committee's impeachment vote, he did so to avoid the certainty of being impeached and removed from office. We became a better nation for having held the president accountable. All of which raises 2 further questions. Should we be considering the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump? Will we again become a better nation by pursuing that option? To answer, we need to set aside President Trump's unremitting attacks on the environment, on our close allies, on the Affordable Care Act, and any disagreements we have over policy, as well as any personal animus, and simply ascertain whether he has engaged in the kind of egregious conduct that would meet the constitutional standards for impeachment and removal from office. This means we have to focus sharply on his potentially impeachable offenses. In doing so, we will find it useful to compare them, when possible, to similar offenses by President Nixon, found to be impeachable by the House Judiciary Committee in 1974. Here's a list of some of President Trump's potentially impeachable offenses developed as of this writing: a possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power, On May 9, 2017, Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, who is investigating both his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, and Russia's connections to the Trump campaign in connection with influencing the 2016 presidential election. 2 days later, President Trump admitted to NBC's Lester Holt that Comey's firing had to do with that, quote, Russia thing. In other words, President Trump acknowledged that he was trying to shut down the FBI investigation into his own possible conspiracy with Russia. Flynn has since pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. The Comey firing uncannily echoes Nixon's firing of the special Watergate prosecutor for seeking highly damaging information about that president, a brazen defiance of the rule of law that triggered the start of impeachment proceedings against Nixon. A second possible interference with or obstruction of the administration of justice and an abuse of power. President Trump has persistently and publicly attacked those heading the Russia investigation, including Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and has repeatedly condemned Attorney General Jeff Sessions for recusing himself, suggesting that he wants to fire any and all of them in order to get control of the Russian investigation. He actually did give an order to fire Mueller. A failure to care that the laws are faithfully executed is required by the Constitution. To try to deflect public concern about his possible role, well, it continues from there. The case for impeaching Trump by Elizabeth Holtzman.
The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's about exactly why rich people, I'm talking about people who make more than $1 million a year marginally, and over $3 million a year, you know, that group totally, why this group of people who are multi-millionaires and are making, literally bringing into the house over $1 million a year and over $3 million a year, why would they want to destroy Obamacare? Turns out there's a very simple answer, and a very straightforward answer, and a rather shocking answer, that they would put all this time and effort, years of work, into trying to kill Obamacare and throw 20, 30, 40,000 people, million people, off their health care. And you can see it, hear it, read all about it, as it were, over at thomhartmann.com in our new members-only video. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and just a couple of, anyway, one little short, just keeping you up to date on the news as it goes. And by the way, it was Warren Beatty who starred in Bulworth, and it's really a good movie. I mean, it's a good, dumb, fun, funny. It's kind of, you know, you get a sense of, as I recall, it was in the 90s when that movie came out, but whatever. It was a good movie. So anyhow, the headline, countless ballots destroyed in Los Angeles as official Dropbox goes up in flames. This is particularly weird, you know, because the Republican Party of California has been putting phony drop boxes up that say official Dropbox on them when they're not. So presumably Republicans will know where they are and will put their ballots there. I don't think they're trying to harvest and destroy ballots, but this was an actual state of California Dropbox, and somebody basically put some flaming thing in it that destroyed an estimated 100 ballots in one of the actual real drop boxes. Meanwhile, I mentioned yesterday that there is a printing company, printing and mailing house, one of these, they call them direct mail companies, they do the junk mail that you get, right? They not only print it, but they also address it and ship it and all that, deliver it to the post office. This company was flying Trump 2020 flag. So, of course, the governor of Ohio hired them, or somebody in Ohio, some in the Ohio government hired them to print the ballots for some of Ohio's biggest counties, including Cuyahoga, Lorain, and Summit counties, and two of Pennsylvania's biggest counties, including Pittsburgh's Allegheny County. Now, these are places where there's lots and lots and lots of Democratic votes. So the company with the Trump 2020 flag on their flagpole printed the ballots for these folks and then just never got around to delivering them. Honest to God. I mean, this is how bad it is. Nearly 2 weeks after absentee ballots were sent, this is from the Cleveland Plain Dealer, right, the local Cleveland newspaper. Nearly 2 weeks after absentee ballots were to be sent to Ohio voters, thousands are still waiting for their ballots due to delays with a Cleveland-based printing company serving 16 counties, including Cuyahoga, Lorain, and Summit. Midwest Direct is keeping mum on exactly how many ballots are still delayed. The company flew the Trump 2020 flag this year at its Cleveland headquarters, but they took it down recently. Midwest Direct's owners, Brothers CEO Richard Gebbe and Chairman James Gebbe, say they are Trump supporters. Richard Gebbe has made political donations to Republicans and has written public Facebook posts questioning the severity of the coronavirus and criticizing Taylor Swift for her accusations that Trump was seeking to dismantle the post office. Right. So, bottom line, people in Pittsburgh, people in Cleveland still don't have their ballots. Yet. 2 weeks to the election. They literally do not yet have their ballots. This is how bad it is with the Republican administration. Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, what's up?
Not much, Tom. We're a long time no talk. We're a long time listener and really appreciate the program. Hang around a little longer. I don't want you to retire. It's where, again, there's a portion of America that is mentally ill. And the whole thing is my problem is, you know, a lot of people probably think I'm crazy, but the whole thing is there's religious people out there that believe in Jesus Christ, peace, love, and truth. And those people are going to vote for anger, hate, and lies than Donald Trump. Could you give me an explanation, please?
Sure. In Christianity, just like in every religion, there are basically two factions. There is the Enlightenment, love, peace, pacifism, kind of Buddhist faction. And even in Buddhism, you see this. I mean, it's the atrocities being committed in Myanmar are being committed in the name of Buddhism. And then on the other side, you've got the people who are fans of the angry God theory and the we are the victims theory. And I think it's a temperament thing. I think that some small percentage, roughly 20%, according to John Dean's book on authoritarianism. The title of the book is Conservatives Without Conscience. Roughly 20% of the population of the United States, and it varies from country to country, but it doesn't vary very much. And a lot seems to have to do with the kind of world that people grew up in, whether it was safe or unsafe. But basically, you got a small percentage, 20% roughly, about a fifth of the population, who are authoritarians. They want a strong father figure. They don't feel safe in the world, and they want to be protected. And so, in politics, they go for the strong father figure, and in religion, they go for the religion with the God who will strike down their enemies. And so that's Trump and the so-called Trump Christians. And then you got other people who did grow up feeling safe and nurtured and feel like humanity is part of their family rather than their enemy, and who have embraced some sort of a spiritual experience at some point in their lives. And, they're embracing religion, their particular religion, whichever one it may be, and this applies to, I think, all the world's religions. They're embracing the parts of the religion that are all in for love and enlightenment. It's
so
pretty
they can
simple,
vote
Rob.
for anger, hate, and lies.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And by the way, they don't just vote for it. In the churches that are openly promoting the Trump presidency, from the pulpit, you're hearing anger, hate, and lies being preached. There's plenty of anger and hate, but there's plenty of that stuff in the Bible. If you want to go looking for it, it's easy to find. Rob, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's up?
Hey, I just had an idea. I was thinking about how past presidents, they would graciously ride with the newly elected one in the car over to the White House. They'd all stand there for pictures in front of the door and be very gracious with each other. And I'm having problems visualizing that. So I'm thinking, where's Trump going to hide out? You think he's going to hide out in the bathroom in the White House or throw a tantrum or what?
Well, I said earlier, I think he's going to resign and get Pence to pardon him, and then he just won't have to show up. He won't even be president anymore, and Pence will be president. It's, and there's no, keep in mind the Republicans, their motto basically has been, at least since 2000, has been, we don't care what is tradition, we only care about what's legal. So, tradition is that presidents hand off the presidency one to the next. There's nothing in the law that requires that. So, I would be astonished if he does that. And this is what they're going to say. This is what they're going to say when they try to steal the election. And they say, we're going to be talking with Jamie Raskin right after the break at the top of the hour, at the top of the next hour about this topic, Congressman Jamie.
Yeah,
they're going to say, the law says, just to finish this thought, and then I'll throw it to you, Sandra.
Yeah.
They're going to say the law says that if a state submits two sets of electors, then the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives and the individual states get to vote on it. And therefore, we control 26 states, so we can put Donald Trump, back in the White House. And people are going to yell and scream and go, how dare you, that's wrong, and all that kind of stuff. And their answer is going to be, yeah, well, traditionally that's wrong, but legally we can do it, so we're going to do it. It's the same thing Mitch McConnell said 4 years ago when he said, well, I'm not going to give a hearing to Merrick Garland. There's nothing in the law that says I have to. Back to you, Sandra.
Yeah. Well, I also sent an email to Ben Sass and basically told him if he had a spine, he'd vote against putting someone to the top Supreme Court who's only had 2 years actual experience and clearly isn't aware of many of the laws just as they exist right now. But who knows what he'll do? But he's kind of digging a hole for himself there too with his comments with Trump.
Yeah, I've got to go back and look at Twitter, and I'm not holding my breath that Ben Sass or anybody on his staff is going to respond to my tweet. But I think that the meme needs to get out there. If you want to pretend to have political courage, you're going to have to do something more than simply, pipe up on a private phone conversation.
If the election shows at the House, we get more seats on that, would that not mean that if this all goes to the House, that we would still be able to straighten this out? Or
no, because it's conceivable if it goes into January, if the Democrats succeed in taking the state legislatures of 7 states. But that's, number one, extremely unlikely, and B, it's pretty unlikely that it's going to take that long to figure it all out. We'll see. We'll see. In fact, we'll be talking with Jamie Raskin about it right after the top of the hour. Yep, there you go. Thank you, Sandra. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day. I got to tell you about Justin Trudeau and the Canadian border, too. It's amazing. And welcome back. Tony in Long Beach, California. Hey, Tony, thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thank you for taking my call. I wanted to tell you that everything that has happened in the Trump administration has affected me personally. I'm an immigrant. I'm Mexican. My first language is not English. I'm a cancer survivor. In every possible way, I've been affected by this administration's approach to people like me. And being a Mexican, I come from one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And these days, the Republican Party and Donald Trump make me feel just at home. At this point, I've seen from Donald Trump and the Republicans every single play in the book that I saw growing up in Mexico back in the 70s from the PRI, which was an extremely corrupt party that was governing the country for 70 years. And those exact same things, now that I'm in Long Beach and I see those fake polls that the Republican Party planted here, that's Mexico in the 70s. I was in D.C. a couple of weeks back, and I saw the barricades outside of the White House, and that's Mexico in the 70s. It's amazing how we cannot learn from the experiences of the neighboring countries. To me, just the fact that Donald Trump has neglected the geopolitical needs of the Latin American region for the past 4 years also tells how we are not aware of the international environment and what we can learn from it. To me, it's amazing to see I come from this generation that we grew up thinking that the most powerful countries in the world were the countries that generated knowledge. And we always saw the United States as a beacon of technology and science and social progress. And to me, it's just mind-blowing to think I moved to the U.S. now, and I made it here, and I'm in the only country that's out of the Paris Accord agreement. It's just mind-blowing. I sure hope we can change course with this election. And one of the very important things that I think determine the character of the American people, and of course this comes from being an immigrant. I'm condemned to comparison. Just thinking about what you were talking about a few minutes back about evangelists, I think the United States is victim of a very recent past, meaning other countries can look back to thousands of years of history that anchor the hearts of their people. Mexicans, we look at the Aztec and the Mayan culture. Italians look at the Romans, Norwegians at the Vikings, and Peruvians to the Incas. And we have a very long history that we can anchor ourselves to. So we belong to our country. In the United States, history is so recent, and the local culture was so devastated that people don't belong to the country. The country belongs to the Americans. That's why people think America is their country and America cannot belong to me because I'm not them. That's why people think Jesus Christ belongs to me. And they just don't see that they don't belong to the thing. I mean, the thing doesn't belong to them, but they belong to the thing.
I get your point, Tony. And there's people who are promoting those ideas, that kind of tribal notion, as a way of gaining political and in some cases even economic power. But spot on. Tony, I'm sorry, we're hitting a break here. I got to run, but thank you for the call. And thank you. Your points are all so very well made. Thank you. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. The hidden history of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. Hey, we have a special new video up for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. And it's about how FDR in 1944, in fact, January 44, in his State of the Union address, talked about how important it was to add rights to the Bill of Rights. The original Bill of Rights was all political rights. He said it's time to enshrine economic rights in our Constitution. I would add, like most of the governments of Europe have done. And this includes the right to housing, the right to food, the right to a good job that pays well, the right to an education, including a college education, and the right to health care. It is pretty powerful stuff. And frankly, I think that what this coronavirus crisis is proving is that we are all in this together, and that Reagan's thing about government is never going to help you was just a load of crap. And so you can check it out over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and we have a just absolutely remarkable day going on here. Gary in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to let you know that there is a difference in what we consider Antifa and what the hard right considers Antifa. They think that it means anti-First Amendment. That's the people that won't let other people talk. And we usually think it's anti-fascist. But that's really all I had to say. You have a good day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Gary. It does mean anti-fascist. I've never heard that before. That must be the new meme over at Fox News or something. But, I thought everybody understood that Antifa was anti-fascist. That's amazing. Doug in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Doug, what's up?
How you doing, Tom? Always love your show. I read an article this morning
that said Trump had, because he thinks the Mueller report cleared him of any kind of involvement with Russia, that he tweeted he was going to declassify the Mueller report so we can all see that he's not guilty. And it was going.
Yeah, that was last week.
Today. Oh, was that last week? Did we ever get a ruling on that?
Yeah, and then today, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Today was the deadline. Trump tweeted that last week, and so Jason Leopold, as I recall, or one of the reporters for one of the big progressive sites, filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit saying, okay, cool, because Trump's tweet was explicit. I want the entire Russia investigation declassified, no redactions, exclamation mark, right? That's not verbatim, but it's damn close. And so, this lawsuit said, that he's the president. He has the power to classify or declassify things for any reason at any time. And he just declassified this publicly, and therefore I'd like those documents. And Mark Meadows went in and said, no, he was lying under oath. He didn't say he was lying. He didn't use that phrase. But what he said was, no, that's not what he meant.
Yeah, it wasn't an official declassification. I just can't believe that they're trying to say that his words don't matter. I mean, he said it. It's public record, so it should be declassified. I'm really looking forward to getting that full report.
I know. I was thinking, wow, this is going to be really cool. I would love to see the Mueller report, but I don't think it's going to happen. Doug, thanks for the call. David in Leadwood, Missouri. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, Tom. It's a new day, and are you there?
Indeed it is. I am.
What I'm thinking about is us children of the 60s would be happy back then now, knowing that there is no draft, marijuana is nearly legal. But if you really think about how many people and how many heads had to get busted just to get the draft ended, we need to push harder because we get such little consequence of what we do. What Angela Davis said years ago is most politicians should be standing in the employment lines. I believe most of them should actually be in jail. And here's to you, and for ending the draft, which we did get that done, but we were so...
Well, the way we ended the draft was by ending the war.
Yes, sir, but we were so feeble-minded thinking that health care wasn't an issue and everything else. We are learning.
Yeah.
If we could live long enough to keep trying to push for change, it will come. I have faith.
There you go. There you go. I do too, David. Thank you. Thank you for the call. John in San Francisco, speaking of the 60s. Hey, John. I spent the summer of 1968 in San Francisco.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, hi. I was in the...
John, your phone is going in and out. I'm not sure what the deal is, but I'm going to put you on hold. John's on line 6, Joyce, if you want to check that out. Mark in Framingham, Massachusetts. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Well, first, I don't know if you saw this story this morning, but someone had graffitied "No Fascist USA," and Fox News called it an anti-Trump graffiti, which I thought was funny because it didn't mention Trump. It just said anti. It just said no fascism. But really, what I want to ask you is, so a lot of people, such as myself in my age, we'd like to see the Democratic Party move in a bit more of a leftward direction. But given that Bernie Sanders is almost 80, it's unlikely that he'll be a candidate in 2024 or 2028. So do you think that there is a future for the progressive movement within the Democratic Party? Or do you think it's going to stay within the sort of neoliberal paradigm?
Well, the neoliberal paradigm has all the money. I mean, neoliberalism is basically, soft corporatism. And that's why we've had it basically since the early 90s when Clinton and Al Fromm created the DLC and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the reality. And of course, since the 80s when Reagan made it the policy of the United States, essentially. But I think that the progressive politicians have an extraordinary future. I mean, look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, what a rock star she is. I think she's the next generation's Bernie. And it's going to come a whole lot faster than it did for Bernie. And, the whole squad, I mean, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar There's a bunch of really great politicians out there, really good, solid, progressive politicians. In fact, we're going to be hearing from one in about 6 minutes. Jamie Raskin is going to be with us. Mark, I'm sorry I got to run, but thank you for the call. It's a good question. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Let's talk pills. To treat everything from allergies to heart problems, half of Americans take a prescription medicine every day, and nearly all of us reach for the pill bottle on occasion. It's perfectly safe, though, because the Food and Drug Administration regulates the ingredients that go into those medicinal compounds, right? Yes, assuming they're produced in the USA. Aren't they? Mostly, no. Take antibiotics. The New York Times reports that ingredients for the majority of these bacteria fighters are now made almost exclusively in China and India, as are the components of dozens of other major drugs. Unbeknownst to most Americans and to our doctors, China has become the world's preeminent supplier of medicines. As one major drug company puts it, if tomorrow China stopped supplying pharmaceutical ingredients, the worldwide pharmaceutical industry would collapse. What's at work here is mindless globalization and deregulation. Our politicians threw open the U.S. market to drug imports while also letting foreign manufacturers go uninspected and unregulated. So, companies located in China can cut corners and undercut our own regulated pill makers. America's last producer of penicillin's ingredients, for example, shut down in 2004, leaving us dependent on China. FDA, our supposed watchdog, doesn't even know where a drug's ingredients come from. Why? Because drug companies say they don't like to reveal their sources. So they don't. The Times found that one federal database lists the existence of about 3,000 foreign drug plants that ship to the U.S., while another lists 6,800. No one knows which is correct, if either. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is ridiculous. For the sake of America's health, security, and economy, let's regulate all pill makers and rebuild our own industry.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Measuring What Counts, the Global Movement for Well-Being by Joe Stiglitz, Jean-Paul Fatoussi, and Martine Duran. And this is from the first chapter labeled Overview. The high-level expert group on the measurement of economic performance and social progress, also known as HLEG, builds on the analyses and recommendations of the 2009 Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, also known as the Stiglitz-Sen-Fatoussi Commission, in highlighting the role of well-being metrics in policy and encouraging a more active dialogue among economic theory and statistical practice. The report makes explicit the often implicit assumptions hidden in statistical practices and their real-world consequences. Its central message is that what we measure affects what we do. If we measure the wrong thing, we will do the wrong thing. If we don't measure something, it becomes neglected, as if the problem didn't exist. There's no simple way of representing every aspect of well-being in a single number in the way GDP describes market economic output. This has led to GDP being used as a proxy for both economic welfare, like people's command over commodities, and general welfare, which also depends on people's attributes and non-market activities. GDP was not designed for this task. We need to move beyond GDP when assessing a country's health and complement GDP with a broader dashboard of indicators that would reflect the distribution of well-being in society and its sustainability across the social, economic, and environmental dimensions. The challenge is to make the dashboard small enough to be easily comprehensible, but large enough to summarize what we care about the most. The 2008 crisis and its aftermath illustrate why a change in perspective is needed. The GDP loss that followed the crisis was not the temporary one-off event predicted by conventional macroeconomic models. Its effects have lasted over time, suggesting that the crisis caused the permanent loss of significant amounts of capital. Not just machines and structures, but also hidden capital in the form of lower on-the-job training, permanent scars on young people entering the labor market during a recession, and lower trust in an economic system rigged to benefit a few. Different metrics, including better measurements of people's economic insecurity, could have shown that the consequences of the recession were much deeper than the GDP statistics indicated, and governments might have responded more strongly to mitigate the negative impacts of the crisis. If, on the basis of GDP, the economy is perceived to be well on the road to recovery, as many governments believed in 2010, one would not take the strong policy measures needed to support people's living conditions suggested by metrics that inform on whether most of the population still feels in recession. Nor would one take measures to bolster the safety net and social protection in the absence of metrics on the extent of people's economic insecurity. These failings in the policy responses to the crisis were compounded by overly focusing on the consequences of public spending in raising government's liabilities, when the spending could take the form of investment, increasing the assets in governments and countries' balance sheets. The same follows when measures of unemployment do not reflect the full extent of a country's unused labor resources. The beyond GDP agenda is sometimes characterized as anti-growth, but this is not the case. The use of a dashboard of indicators reflecting what we value as a society would have led, most likely, to stronger GDP growth than that actually achieved by most countries after 2008. This book also looks at progress in implementing the recommendations of the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi Commission since 2009, identifying areas that require increased focus by statistical agencies, researchers, and policymakers. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, agreed by the international community in 2015, clearly go far beyond GDP. But their 169 policy targets and more than 200 indicators for global monitoring are too many to guide policies. Countries will have to identify their priorities within the broader UN agenda and upgrade their statistical capacities, which, even in developed countries, are insufficient to monitor whether the agreed-upon commitments are being met. The international community should invest in upgrading the statistical capacity of developing countries, especially in areas where country data are needed to assess global phenomena, such as climate change or the world distribution of income. Inequality in income and wealth has today a central role in policy discussions in ways it did not in 2009. But important progress is still needed in a range of areas, such as measuring what happens at both ends of the income distribution, integrating different data sources, and measuring the joint distribution of income, consumption, and wealth at the individual level. When looking at inequality, it's also important to look at differences between groups. These are called horizontal inequalities, at inequalities within households, and the way resources are shared and managed, which are especially important in the case of wealth. We should also look beyond inequality in outcomes to inequality of opportunity. Inequality of opportunity is even more unacceptable than inequality of outcomes, but the operational distinction between the two is fuzzy, as we don't observe all circumstances that shape people's outcomes and are independent of their efforts. The book Measuring What Counts by Joe Stiglitz and friends.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us, Congressman Jamie Raskin. He represents the 8th District of Maryland, previously a constitutional law professor and an expert on the 12th Amendment. He's on the Rules Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight Committee, etc. Raskin.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Raskin, R-A-S-K-I-N. Congressman, welcome back to the program. I'm really fond of this emerging Democratic meme referring to the Electoral College as a loophole, the Electoral College loophole. Give us a quick snapshot of how that Electoral College loophole has put the last two Republicans in the White House and how it could, at least in the Republican fever dreams. I wrote a piece back in March about how I was hearing from Republicans I know in Washington, D.C. who were saying, we're going to use the 12th Amendment to put Trump back into the White House no matter what happens. it was it was well received, shall we say, or it created a bit of a splash. But I'm curious your take on how this plays out and what might happen.
Tom, thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be with you. Well, as you know, 2 of our last 5 presidents became president after losing the popular vote. George W. Bush in 2000, after the sequence of events culminating in the Supreme Court's 5-4 decision in Bush v. Gore, and then Donald Trump again in 2016, where he lost by more than 3 million votes to Hillary Clinton, and yet was able to eke out an electoral college victory. So there are the basic structural problems with the electoral college. The winner in the popular vote can lose an electoral college vote. The loser in the popular vote can win in the electoral college vote. It reduces the whole playing field to about 6 or 7 states in the general election, which means the vast majority of Americans who live in safe red states or safe blue states are essentially marginalized and sidelined during the election. So those are the structural problems that just go along with the electoral college. But the other one is the strategic mischief that is invited by a very creaky, antiquated, decentralized, and murky system. And that's really what people are talking about now, that Trump is looking at a Democratic landslide, perhaps of historic proportions, in this election. And that would mean an electoral college majority if you just translated the popular vote in all of the states directly into the electoral college vote, which is the way it should be done. But what they're talking about doing is getting state legislatures to essentially disregard and nullify a popular vote for Biden in swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, where they've got Republican control over both the state House and the state Senate. And there they would claim that they've got the exclusive Article 2 plenary power or absolute power over the Electoral College, and they're just going to disregard the popular votes, say there's too much chaos or fraud or whatever nonsense Donald Trump is talking about, and then install a slate of Trump electors or install a slate of electors, devoted to a Republican, some other Republican, all of which would be geared to denying Joe Biden a majority in the Electoral College. And if he doesn't get to 270 and all of the electors are turned in, at that point, it would be kicked into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election. Now, you say, why do the Republicans want to get it into the House? Well, under the 12th Amendment, we are voting not one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. So California gets a vote, and Idaho gets a vote. New York gets a vote, Montana gets a vote, and so on. So right now, the Republicans control 26 state delegations in the House. The Democrats control 22, and 2 of them, Michigan and Pennsylvania, are tied. So there's a kind of shadow war going on to try to seize as many state delegations as possible in the House elections. But I think that's unlikely. It could happen. It's unlikely, but the real battle, I think, takes place when the Electoral College votes get counted. And if any of the Republican legislatures try to do this, at that point, the procedures of the 12th Amendment and the Electoral Count Act of 1887 kick in, and the House and the Senate together, the Congress would essentially decide which electors count and which don't. And the key piece of evidence there is what the governors issue in a so-called certificate of ascertainment. And the reason that this is positive for the Democratic majority is that even in these states where you've got Republicans controlling state legislatures against coming Democratic majorities for president, there are Democratic governors. So in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina. So even if you've got runaway rogue state legislatures, which purport to appoint electors for Trump or somebody else, we still could have the governor issuing the certificate of ascertainment for the people's real choice.
So you think that it's unlikely for this to play out this way?
Well, no, I think...
Like the Tilden Hayes election? I mean, in the Tilden Hayes election, the Democrat actually won both the popular vote and the majority of the Electoral College, but didn't end up in the White House.
Correct. And I mean, look, here's the safest thing I can say, which is that the bigger the popular vote majority, the bigger the Electoral College majority for Biden, the more difficult it is going to be to steal this election. In other words, a landslide of epic proportions is our best antidote and deterrent to all of the mischief and all of the nonsense. But we are preparing for battle at every conceivable phase just because we've been living with Donald Trump for 4 years, and it would be irresponsible to do anything else.
Yeah, I had a Republican that I regularly debate on this program say to me, this was back in the spring, say to me, Mitch McConnell taught us with the Merrick Garland nomination that tradition doesn't mean a damn thing. What matters is the black letter of the law. And the law says that if we can get enough states to offer competing electoral slates so that the winner is ambiguous, we can throw this into the House and thus to the states, and we can win this thing. And that's what I was reporting on. I know that you're a big fan of the nationalpopularvote.com compact as a way of blowing up what I refer to as the Electoral College loophole. I think calling it a loophole is a great framing device to help people realize that we need to do something about this. Where are we at with that? We've got about a minute and a half before we hit a hard break here. Or do you have another solution for dealing with the Electoral College?
Well, this was the very first bill I introduced when I was a state senator, and Maryland became the state that kicked off the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And we are now more than halfway there in terms of having enough electors in the coalition. We need 270 electors. I think we've got about 60% of that in order to kick it off. And essentially what it says is that the states will grant their electors not to the winner internally in the state, but to the winner of the national vote. I think ultimately this is going to be what we have to do. I hope it will happen in the next term. But in the meantime, you're right that the Electoral College is a blot on the Constitution, as Thomas Jefferson said. But in this election, we've got to stand by it because that is the rule of law. We don't want Republicans suddenly picking up that rhetoric and saying, yeah, the Electoral College is a mess. Let's just turn it over to the Supreme Court. They would love nothing more than to get it into the Supreme Court. It's up to Congress under the 12th Amendment and under the Electoral Count Act to count those electors, and we're perfectly able to do it, and the states are perfectly able to count the votes despite all of the propaganda and disinformation by Donald Trump and his various aides who are trying to undermine public confidence in the election.
There you go. And let's hope it works out well and that we can get rid of this Electoral College loophole. Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland's 8th District. Congressman, thanks so much for dropping by today.
My pleasure.
Always great talking with you. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day right after this. And lines are open, as they say in the radio business. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And this is, I think, a fascinating take here. Donald Trump's lies are getting sillier, stupider, and staler. And this, going back to when he was in Pennsylvania a couple days ago, Donald Trump came out and said this. He says, Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. They say he was born in Scranton, but he left. He left. He abandoned you. Right. He left when he was 10 years old. He abandoned Scranton, right? And then Trump says, we are rounding the turn on the pandemic. We're going to crash the virus very quickly. It's already happening. It's happening. Right. As Chris Christie is getting out of the hospital, as Herman Cain is still dead, as 220,000 Americans are dead. By the way, the CDC this morning released a report indicating that 285,000 Americans have died beyond the norm for this time of year. The third leading cause of death in America right now is COVID-19. The third leading cause of death. The infections are exploding. Hospitalizations are exploding. Donald Trump is doing his super spreader events, and the consequence of that is going to be that in these towns, in these communities where he's doing these super spreader events, we are soon going to see a lot of people getting very sick and a lot of people dying. I mean, this is just not a good thing. And Trump is saying we're turning the corner. I mean, you know, it's like being president of the United States is not the same thing as selling condos. But Trump is treating it like it is. You know, Trump built Trump Tower, and he didn't want to pay to put in a sprinkler system. You know, an automatic put the fire out sprinkler system in his building. And so he got some sort of a variance or some sort of an exception or something like that was supposed to give him a short period of time to get it done. Never did it. There was a fire in one of the Trump apartments. A guy died there. This was maybe 7-8 years ago, something like that. And, you know, because Trump had not put in the sprinklers. I mean, and so, you know, he's selling them. When he's selling them, I'm sure he's saying, oh, it's all safe and everything's wonderful. It's concrete. Concrete buildings don't catch on fire. Why the concrete building? Well, you know, his friends in the mob were in the concrete business. That's a whole nother story. But, you know, David K. Johnston tells that story very well. But when you're lying to sell a condo, or when you're lying to sell commercial real estate, or when you're lying to, you know, or Donald Trump calls it, you know, creative exaggeration. When you're lying to sell those things, one guy might die in one of the condos, or maybe even the entire building could go down, you know, eventually. But it doesn't mean that hundreds of thousands of people are going to die. The stuff that Donald Trump has done his whole life, ripping off his contractors, you know, refusing to rent people of color, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The stuff that Donald Trump has done his whole entire life has not had huge consequences outside of his world. But now here we are in this situation where the stuff he's done his whole entire life is now amplified 100 million times, 340 million times, the number of citizens in the United States, by the fact that he's president of the United States. And so when he lies about CNN turning off their cameras, or when he talks about saying, we passed VA choice, which Obama passed, or when he says, and Mexico is paying for the wall, by the way, you know, these lies actually have a real capacity for harm. We'll be right back. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag You're It. So it turns out back in November, the spy agencies in the United States were notifying the Trump administration that something's going on in China. Looks like another SARS outbreak. Maybe we should get ready for this. It was ignored. I've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program that basically goes through the whole timeline. All the way from, you know, well, actually going back to 2018 when Trump disbanded 3 different anti-pandemic agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and the executive branch. Just closed them down, fired the people. That was the end of that. How he ignored the intelligence in November, he ignored the intelligence in December, he ignored the epidemic now coming into the United States in January, he ignored it in February, just going the blow-by-blow timeline. And I think it's really worth having it all in one place, you know, a good recap, a good summary of this that you can refer to and you can share with your friends. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, you know, Justin Trudeau, this is just, you know, what is going on around the world is, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but there's got to be a word for it. This you know, Trump says, oh, you know, I kept America safe by closing the border to China, right? This is like the only talking point he's got. The only sales pitch he has is that he blocked travel from China back in February or March or whenever it was. And then, a few months later, he blocked travel from Europe. And he did that in such a screwed up, half-assed fashion that, just announcing it one day and boom, all of a sudden, all these people, without telling the Customs and Border Protection people who have to check people's passports when they come into the country, that suddenly millions, or hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands anyway, of American citizens were going to be fleeing Europe and coming back to the United States. Didn't even bother to tell them. So at O'Hare and at Dulles and at JFK and at Atlanta, airports up and down all over the United States, wherever you could get a direct flight into the United States from Europe, you had people having to wait in these massive, crammed together. I mean, they were filling corridors for 1,000 yards, filled with people. Well, that would be quite a distance. It would be a kilometer. Well, maybe, I don't know, but for a long, long distance, spreading virus with each other. I mean, this was Trump screwing this thing up coming in from Europe. It was probably one of the major super spreader events in the United States, arguably of all time. I mean, it's just breathtaking. So anyhow, other countries are taking note of Trump's absolute failure to do anything about this in the United States, the coronavirus. His official position now is don't worry, be happy. And of course, he's saying this in part because he can do these super spreader events now, and the reporting on how many people got sick and how many people died as a result of these rallies that he's doing will not come until after the election, and he knows it. You think he cares about the people who showed up in Tucson? I mean, I saw the pictures. There were people, there were boomers in those crowds. There were people in their 60s and 70s. Some of them are going to die, in all probability. Donald Trump doesn't care. He has never cared in his whole life about anybody except himself. And we're hearing that now from Republicans. But anyhow, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, this was Wednesday of last week. First of all, he said, we're anticipating keeping our border closed with the United States until the United States gets control of the virus. That's a huge if, or a huge until. And today they made it official. Or maybe it was yesterday afternoon, but the news, it was in the papers today, that Canada has closed its border with the United States. I mean, that's been going on for a while, but now they're maintaining a closed border with the United States, specifically to keep COVID out of Canada. Other countries around the world realize that not only is this a disease that has killed 285,000 Americans unofficially, 220,000 officially, and if you figure for every person who dies of COVID, there's probably 10 who are going to be permanently disabled by COVID, whether they're going to have COPD and breathing problems for the rest of their lives, or whether they're going to have dementia for the rest of their lives. We know this is one of the side effects. They call it brain fog. It's dementia. Whether they're going to have strokes, whether they're going to be disabled, whether they're going to have permanent long-term heart disease. There was a study done with university athletes who had COVID, who did not have serious case. None of them, not a single one, needed to be hospitalized. 80% of them had measurable heart damage when they looked at their hearts with an echocardiogram. So, Canada, Mexico, all the European countries, I mean, pretty much every place else in the world, Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, they all get it. We've got to do whatever we can to stop this virus. And the easiest thing that you can do is have everybody wear a mask. If 95% of the population wears masks and you limit indoor groups, then, you can get control of this virus. Country after country after country has done it. And Canada's working on it. But if you do what Trump is doing, I mean, Trump, I think that the other part of Trump's strategy is he is sowing chaos for Joe Biden to inherit. He is trying to cause so much death and destruction in the United States that Joe Biden won't be able to handle it. I think that the Republican Party, and Donald Trump in particular, have moved away from a governing agenda, away from a legislative agenda, not that they ever really had one outside of deregulation and tax cuts, But they've even moved away from those things, and they've moved toward how do we pour salt into the ground? You know, this is this biblical thing of, you know, you conquer a people and burn their cities to the ground and then pour salt into their fields so that they can't grow crops. That's what Donald Trump is trying to do to America so that Joe Biden will inherit just a totally damaged country. Now, whether Trump is doing this because some foreign oligarch told him to or because he's just a mean SOB, I don't know.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
But I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. It could easily be both. I'll pick up your phone calls after the break. It's coming up on 28 minutes past 3.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Entrepreneurial State by Mariana Mazzucato. And this is from the introduction titled Thinking Big Again. Across the globe, countries, including in the developing world, look to emulate the success of the U.S. economy. In doing so, they look at the power of, quote, market-driven, end quote, mechanisms versus what might seem like old-style state-driven mechanisms in places like Europe or the ex-Soviet Union. But the United States is not what it seems. The preacher of the small state, free market doctrine has for decades been directing large public investment programs in technology and innovation that underlie its past and current economic success. From the internet to biotech and even shale gas, the U.S. state has been the key driver of innovation-led growth, willing to invest in the most uncertain phase in the innovation cycle and let business hop on for the easier ride down the way. If the rest of the world wants to emulate the U.S. model, they should do as the United States actually did, not as it says it did. More state, not less. A key part of this lesson should be to learn how to organize, direct, and evaluate state investments so that they can be strategic, flexible, and mission-oriented. Only in this way will top minds find it an honor to work for the state. This is something that needs to be understood not only by the rest of the world, but in the United States itself, where the dominant political narrative is endangering funding for future innovation and economic growth. In 2013, U.S. government spending for basic research fell below what it was a decade earlier, and most likely will continue to fall due to congressional gridlock over the public budget. Rather than static discussions about the size of the deficit, there must be more debate about its actual composition, how to invest strategically in key areas such as research and development, R&D, education, and human capital formation that will increase gross domestic product, the GDP, in the future, bringing the debt-GDP ratio down as a consequence. And how to engage in a debate about the direction of change so that such investments will lead to growth that is not only smarter, that is innovation-led, but also more inclusive and sustainable. These issues are urgent with the upcoming 2016 U.S. presidential election, which could, if properly informed, change the parameters of the current static debate. The United States desperately needs politicians with the courage to swim against the tide of popular rhetoric and outline a bolder vision for the state's dynamic role in fostering the economic growth of the future. In emerging economies such as China, the public sector is indeed investing billions in green technologies with the expectation that these industries will be the engines of future growth. The United States could take inspiration from its own history. In 1961, an American president set out a bold, ambitious, and risky mission to send a man to the moon. Who will have the courage to set out a new vision for America today? Addressing today's societal challenges, for example, those around climate change, requires a vision, a mission, and most of all, confidence about the state's role in the economy. As eloquently argued by Keynes in The End of Laissez-Faire, 1926, the important thing for government is not to do things which individuals are doing already and to do them a little better or a little worse, but to do those things which at present are not done at all. End of quote. This, however, requires the public sector to have vision and confidence, increasingly missing today. Why? What is the role of the public sector in economic growth? After the financial crisis, with public budgets bloated, mainly due to their role in saving the private sector, across the globe we are hearing that in order for nations to be competitive, innovative, and dynamic, we must have more market and less state. As at best, we are told, governments merely facilitate the economic dynamism of the private sector. At worst, their lumbering, heavy-handed, and bureaucratic institutions actively inhibit it. The fast-moving, risk-loving, and pioneering private sector, by contrast, is what really drives the type of innovation that creates economic growth. According to this view, the secret behind an engine of innovation like Silicon Valley lies in its entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. The state can intervene in the economy, but only to fix market failures or to level the playing field. It can regulate the private sector in order to account for the external costs companies may impose on the public, like pollution, and it can invest in public goods, such as basic scientific research or the development of drugs with little market potential. To some on the political right, even fixing market failures would be a sin, because such attempts would lead to worse outcomes in the form of government failures. What all these views have in common is the assumption that the state should stick to fixing markets, not directly try to create and shape them. A 2012 Economist article on the future of manufacturing encapsulates this common misperception. This book is committed to dismantling this false image, which underpins a global trend promoted by conservative economists, politicians, and the media of bashing and diminishing the importance of the state. It focuses on what Tony Judt called a discursive battle. How we talk about the state matters. Depicting private business as the innovative force while the state is cast as the inertial one, necessary for the basics but too large and heavy to be the dynamic engine, is a description that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we continue to depict the state, continues. So the book is The Entrepreneurial State by Mariana Mazzucato.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. We have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for the people who support our program, and it's an interesting one. The phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, has a really interesting history. And the exploitation of that phrase and that history by right-wingers in 20th century America, or late 20th century America, now 21st century America, also has a fascinating and rather grim history. Just the general absurdity of the idea that somebody can lift themselves off the ground by reaching down and pulling on a strap on their boots. I mean, just think about it for a second. But it's used. This is used as justification by right-wingers, particularly over the last 40 years since the Reagan Revolution, to say, "Oh, poor people. It's all, their poverty is their own fault." Check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
I'm thinking about, as I said to Joyce, the rights that ACB, that's Amy Coney Barrett, the rights she doesn't think that you have. And this is the ACB era of the right wing and the rights you don't have. And I was thinking about this in terms of some of their testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Essentially, she comes down on the side that, we are citizens both of the United States and of the states in which we live, and as such, we have rights, privileges, and immunities in both. And those are distinct and separate sets, but there's some overlap, and the overlap is the rights that you have as a citizen of the United States, you also have as a citizen of your state. The only right that they seem to acknowledge is that you have a right to individually own a gun. But all other, Madison's theory or philosophy or understanding of the Constitution was that unless it's otherwise written into statute law, you have, under the Constitution, you have all rights, are presumed. You have rights. But Amy Coney Barrett seems to think, for instance, there is a judicial doctrine, the Supreme Court judicial doctrine called presumed constitutionality. And what she criticized John Roberts on in his ruling on the Affordable Care Act is that the issue was whether or not the remittance you have to, your remittance if you don't have health insurance, whether it's a tax or a penalty. But under the doctrine of presumed constitutionality, if it's ambiguous, then the court is to read that as presuming that the Congress intended it to be constitutional. Therefore, you have to read that as a tax, since the Congress has the plenary power to tax, whereas not to assess a penalty and force you to buy something. So her judicial theory is that all of these things are all states' rights. If it's all states' rights, the states can limit your rights and tell you don't have the right to this, that, and the other thing. She now can't even answer as to whether or not you have a right to Social Security and Medicare, whether that's a constitutional right or not.
She's failing to acknowledge the 9th Amendment, which precedes the 10th Amendment, which is that individual rights are, I mean, this was the debate that Madison and Jefferson had when in November or early December of 1787, when Jefferson was living in Paris, and Madison sent him a first draft of the Constitution that they had just hammered out in Philadelphia. And Jefferson writes back saying, I want a Bill of Rights in this thing. And Madison writes back to him saying, you don't need a Bill of Rights. All the rights, all we're doing is limiting the power of government. All rights remain with the people. That's obvious. That's implied. And Jefferson was like, no, I want a Bill of Rights. And Jefferson won that argument ultimately and brought Madison around to his way of thinking. But and there's some echoes of that in the Federalist Papers as well. But this idea that. Go ahead.
Federalist 84, Hamilton talks about not needing a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is something that princes hand down to their subjects, he said. But if you notice the way the Bill of Rights is worded, the Bill of Rights doesn't grant rights. It doesn't. None of the rights that are acknowledged in the Bill of Rights are not granted. They are simply acknowledged as the right to X, Y, and Z shall not be infringed. In other words, it presumes in the wording, it presumes you have the right, and that the federal government will not infringe upon that right. The right pre-exists. The right is a priori, and that the Bill of Rights acknowledges that the government shall not infringe upon this a priori right that you already have.
Right, exactly, and this, and this was, arguably a debate back then, but I think increasingly Americans, particularly conservatives, have come to argue that rights are granted by government, and I think most of the framers and founders were very clear that rights are, quote, given by God or nature's God, to quote Jefferson. And
well, I think there's a distinction there, Tom. Really. It says in the Declaration of Independence, there are certain unalienable rights, and among those are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Your rights are not given by God. Your rights exist, and they are curtailed. For instance, you do not have a right in most states, as far as I know, to drive 100 miles an hour on any roadway. So as the statutes themselves don't give you rights. Most statutes curtail your rights as to what you can or cannot do. They define the law. They define the boundaries of the law. So the idea is...
So, Paul, we're in the midst here of a wonky conversation that has probably caused half our listeners to turn off their car radios. What's the bottom line? What's the point you're trying to make?
This is the philosophy. This is the alt-right philosophy that they're trying to impose on the country, is that you only have the rights that your state is willing to give you. You don't have any rights as a United States citizen. That's the Donald Trump era. That's the ACB era.
Yeah, and the Lochner era as well.
And the Lochner era, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Paul. Good talking to you. Lynn in El Segundo, California. Hey, Lynn, what's up?
Oh, I'm sorry to follow that wonky conversation because I think I have another one for you. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. I don't object to wonky conversations. I engaged in it for 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first, thank you very, very, very much for having Jamie Raskin on, the constitutional expert, from the Congress. I was hoping that you would discuss with him a question that has been plaguing me since you brought it up long ago about the 12th Amendment and the Electoral Count Act, because help me get a definitive answer. Are we or are we not screwed if there is a contested election and it goes to the House, one state gets one vote, is the election decided by the House delegations who are going to be in the next Congress on January 6th? Are they going to be the ones who vote for the president in case of the contested election, or is it the state legislatures, which I've heard you say many times, people are mistaken. It's the state legislatures, the legislators, the state senators and the state assembly members who will vote for the candidate. They combine their numbers. I have made spreadsheets for both scenarios, and I know that if it's the House delegations, in the future we don't know, but right now it's 26 Republican, 22 Democrat, 2 ties. But I think if it were right now, the tie in Michigan would not be a tie. I think Justin Amash would vote for the Democrats. But anyway, just please clarify. And I don't know why you didn't ask Congressman Raskin to clarify. Is it
my understanding, Lynn, is that my understanding is that the individual states' legislatures, as an entire body. So, if you have a House of Representatives in Michigan that has 70 members in it, and 50 of them are Republicans, and you've got a Senate, I shouldn't have said Michigan, a state, and you've got a Senate that's got 30 members and 20 of them are Democrats. Let's say the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, the House by the Republicans. It doesn't matter. Each member of the legislature of the state has one vote. And so in the example the fictitious example I just created, that would be a state with a Republican majority. That majority then directs their congressional delegation how to vote their electoral votes. Now, the one thing that Raskin said, that Congressman Raskin said, that made me wonder if I had missed something was he made a comment to the effect of Congress gets to decide how they're going to decide which votes to count, or words to that effect. And that was a twist that I didn't recognize. So I need to do a little homework here. But my understanding go ahead.
I'm looking at my chart, which I have all the states. Michigan has a total of 80 Republicans in the combined legislatures and 68 Democrats. So there's a difference of 12. And if we wanted to flip it, we would need 6. So I'm going and donating my dollars, but I don't think the next. I think what I've read is that it counts. The numbers now count. But one last thing.
Yes.
I heard that Nancy Pelosi may not seat all the incoming Congress members if there is a dispute. So it can get really crazy. But
there are half a dozen ways that this thing could go sideways, Lynn, and I don't think that we've even anticipated all of them. Lynn, I got to run, but thank you. Thank you for the call. Love wonky conversations. We'll be right back.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth to multinational corporations, we'd really rather you didn't know all about. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Stick around. And welcome back. Rick in Ford City, Pennsylvania. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind?
Hey, yeah, I was at our Democrat committee meeting in Armstrong County, which I think was in the news about ballots being messed up. And basically what happened was a lot of applications came in that were duplicate applications, as one of the candidates, I won't mention any names, but Trump, people sent a lot of new applications to various people, and then they sent them in. So they sent in multiple applications for mail-in ballots, which kind of throws the system into a mess. Now, the lady that was there,
filter out the dupes.
Right, but that.
By the way, there's no such thing as a Democrat Party, Rick. FYI,
It's the Democratic Party. Well, with the Democratic Party, right? And so, anyway, they had thrown a lot of extra applications in, which caused an issue, which caused a lot of different problems. And so that has been taken care of. I actually received my ballots yesterday from the mail. So it's just that there's a lot of different confusions, a lot of new things. This is the second time we've actually used these systems, and the mail-in is a new process.
So, Rick, let me just try to cut to the chase here. Are you saying that that this printing company in Ohio that is sending ballots into 2 counties in Pennsylvania, including Allegheny County, that company is not the cause of the slowdown or the delay? It was too many applications?
No. Part of the delay
what's your point?
They had to wait. Well, part of the delay was they had to wait for the ballots to actually be confirmed because the Green Party was tossed out on some of them. So they had to back that up. And then all these applications came in, which were backed up because of the things that were happening there. Then once they got that information out, they then put stuff out. Now, the software on the PA Votes, votespa.com shows pending, which means that things are processing. And then it said mailed, which was October 13th. Well, that wasn't true. That was when they actually sent the information to the printing companies so that they could then mail it out. They actually got mailed out on the 15th and the 16th, which meant I got my ballots yesterday on the 19th. So everything was going around the right way, and we had 7,700 votes or ballots here, and they had to go through and process all that stuff. And those have been put out. So, and there's other ways you can vote.
So is the bottom line here, Rick, that you are feeling reassured and comfortable about how things are going, or that we still have problematic?
In my county, yes. I believe we are doing the right thing. The lady is very competent. She's only been on the job for a month, but she has a degree. She just got her degree in law. She took the bar, but she was also involved in a lot of voter registration, voter stuff that had happened in Westmoreland County. So she was on top of things to actually know the right question to ask and actually get organized to make things happen here, which I'm very happy
So this is the county, this is the person in your county who's running elections, or this is the person who's running the Democratic Party?
No, she's the elections person. So she's actually running the process for getting everything together and making sure everything works. And I'm very happy with her.
That's good news.
All this confusing misinformation that's being put out, again, is being put out by people that don't know what's going on and aren't there to see it. So.
Okay. Rick, thank you for the call. And, glad to hear that things are going well in your particular county in Pennsylvania. We'll see how the whole thing shakes out. We'll be right back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. For our video this week for supporters of our program, you can find it over at thomhartmann.com. We're talking about endocrine disruptors as modulators of obesity. This is, in fact, the title of the article in Cell Endocrinology was Endocrine Disruptors as Obesogens. Why is it that almost a third of Americans are obese? And that's not true of, say, Italians. And it turns out there's actually a single measurable, definable variable. There's a category, or actually several broad categories of chemicals that are found in the American food supply in particular places, and therefore fairly easy to avoid, that actually disrupt our endocrine system, our hormone system, and cause us to crave more food, to eat more food, and also downregulate our metabolism so that we burn less energy so that food gets stored as fat. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Adam in New Orleans. Hey, Adam, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I'm becoming increasingly concerned with establishment mainstream media making noises about just a Truth and Reconciliation Commission being sufficient once we win the day, and optimistically win the day. I mean, I could see RICO charges for trillions stolen, conspiracy to commit mass murder, hate-based stochastic terrorism, all as viable charges against the president, his crime family, everyone that has knowingly enabled what he has now done to the United States. And it's not a partisan thing. It's, I'm not saying it should be a partisan commission. I'm saying it should be all fact-based, and we need to sort of restore impartial justice. But we can't just know that this was done and say, okay, we've learned our lesson. Something, the president has to be accountable.
Yeah, I tweeted this out the other day, that I used to think that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission would be a good idea. Now, I'm doing a hashtag lock them all up. The enablers, I think, have been probably the most pernicious part of this thing, Trump's enablers, but it's just not a good thing. I'm with you, Adam. Thank you. Dorothy in Savannah, Georgia. Hey, Dorothy, what's up?
Yeah, hey, Tom. So my sister is a Trumper, and her Trumper group won't vote by mail because they're saying that the response envelopes for the mail-in ballots are marked outside with either a D or an R for the party. Now, I told her that's absolutely not true. Please tell me I don't have to call her and apologize.
To the best of my knowledge, it's not. I'm quite sure that the party that you're registered with does not show on the outside envelope. There may be some state where they're doing that. You're living in Georgia. God only knows what your Secretary of State has come up with, but I've never heard such a thing. I mean, you're supposed to have some anonymity here. I know that there was one of the Trump humpers, I'm forgetting who it was, but was on Fox the other day saying, they can look at your ballot and your name is on your ballot and they know how you voted and they're going to come after you. No, not true. Your name is on the outside of the envelope as your return address, and your signature's on the outside of the envelope so that they can verify that you're you. And once they've verified that you're you, that you're the person who signed it, and that your name is and that you're a registered voter, they throw that envelope away. I mean, they note that you have voted. That's how you can track your vote. But they have no idea who you voted for or what party affiliation you have.
I hope that's the case. And she's in New York, by the way. But, I mean, that would be significant if, in fact, these ballot boxes that the GOP is setting out in California of their own, if those envelopes are marked R or D, wouldn't that be an incentive? Yeah,
well, that's why it's not going to happen, Dorothy. This is just not happening. In fact, I think the simple fact is, if what you say is your sister is describing is true, I would think that there would be pictures all over Twitter of that with outraged folks. I mean, that's it's just another one of these bizarre conspiracy theories. If
Thank you.
If you find that you and I are wrong, please tweet me. But I would bet almost anything. I just can't even imagine it. I mean, it's just way over the top. Dorothy, thank you for the call. Rennie in Reno, Nevada. Hey, Rennie, what's up?
Oh, thanks for saying that lines were open. I jumped at the opportunity. I have a question about the Secret Service. If Trump moves to another country, what if the Secret Service people don't speak that language? And what is it going to cost us?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, these are things that we've never explored before, and so we don't have any idea. I don't know.
So if do Secret Service people have to be American-born citizens, so there's a loyalty to America?
They have to be citizens. I don't think they have to be American-born. In fact, I think the only office in the entire country that requires that is the presidency. And that doesn't even mean necessarily American-born. It says natural-born citizen. I think we've had at least one president who was not born in the United States.
So we might be getting Secret Service. Yeah? Like who?
Go ahead.
Do we go and hire people of the land where he moves as Secret Service to protect him? this could be a huge.
Yeah. So if he moves to Moscow to build his Moscow Tower, right? Do we hire the GRU or whatever? I don't know, Rennie. That's a good question. You got me scratching my head here. I just don't know. Rennie, thank you for the call. Fascinating. Thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It actually, the demo in democracy is root for people. That's us, you and me. So get out there, get active, tag. You're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you today. A little extra special niceness. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
For millions of people around the globe, especially young people, the pressing issue of our time is this: the world is on fire. On fire with climate change, creating a new and intensifying norm of deadly weather extremes that make a dystopian future a distinct possibility. Constant wildfires, rising seas, desertification, global crop failures, widespread hunger, water shortages, etc. Luckily, we are a sentient species with the scientific ability to know that the chief cause of this global destruction is not angry gods, but us. Specifically, humankind's massive extraction and burning of oil, gas, coal, and other fossil fuels. So there's a rising chorus of people shouting, "Fire!" And sure enough, our national government is rushing to the scene to put it out. Unfortunately, our president and his crew of right-wing fire breathers in Congress are not directing the government's hoses at the corporate extractors, but at us, the people, scientists, environmentalists, and other activists who dared to point to the flames and call for global action to stop the conflagration. They seem to think the problem will go away if they can make the protesters go away. Worse, they're fanning the flames by turning the EPA into the PPA, the Polluters Protection Agency. They're slashing dozens of public restraints on the polluters while also opening up our oceans and wilderness areas to their polluting greed and stalling the rational shift to a green energy future. This is Jim Hightower saying the good news is that the people are revolting, in the very best sense of that term, revolting against our corrupt leaders' rush toward climate catastrophe. Our hope is not in leaders, but ourselves, as it has been throughout American history. From the Boston Tea Party forward, creative and gutsy public protest has been democracy's best friend.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Animal Kind, Remarkable Discoveries About Animals and Revolutionary Ways to Show Them Compassion by Ingrid Newkirk and Jean Stone. This is from the very first chapter. Researchers at Germany's Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology